Hi.
Allan, great to see you.
Good to meet you virtually.
Likewise, likewise. Well, you and I go back a few years, and Sailesh, welcome.
How do you pronounce his name? Silas.
Sailesh. So think like a grain silo, like silo, but Sailesh. So the accent's on the first syllable.
Hi, Sailesh.
Hi, how are you?
Well, mine's easy. It's Allan.
All righty. Well, we are streaming live now because I had to set that up in advance.
Yeah.
And if you gentlemen are ready, we can start recording as well. Or if we'd like, we can take a few minutes prior to recording. Totally up to you, gentlemen.
No, I'm happy when you are.
Okay.
Same here.
Okay, great. Why don't we just start recording? We'll jump in. I'll introduce you both, and we're streaming now on Facebook and YouTube. So recording in 3, 2, 1. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this conversation with Mr. Allan Savory and Dr. Sailesh Rao. I'm Jamin Shively of radish.org hosting. And we are very excited because this is really the beginning of a two-part. This is the first part one of a two-part conversation. This first one is just amongst the three of us, though people who are looking on are certainly welcome to type in questions or comments. And then we'll have a public conversation, a really public conversation, in that as many people as wish can join us tomorrow, when we'll be talking from 11 a.m. Pacific time to 1 p.m. Pacific time on the Collective Intelligence Block Party posted on radish.org. We'll also be live streaming that. But what's unique about that second one tomorrow, Friday, February 14th, from 11 a.m. Pacific time to 1 p.m. Pacific time, all the links will be up on Radish, is that you can actually click on a link to join the video conference. And just like you see the three of us, you will be right here with us tomorrow, Friday, to continue this extremely important conversation. It's really part of a broader set of conversations. In fact, tomorrow, we're going to be kicking off with a 2-hour segment on solar radiation management, another very controversial topic as an extreme, arguably extreme measure to cool the planet in time. And the work of you gentlemen is really on the longer term holistic healing of the planet. And I really thank and commend you both for joining us. I'd like to ask each of you to kind of say a few words to introduce yourself and a little of your background, but the topic itself will encompass both veganism and holistic land management. We're going to address certainly some of the, the key differences and the two different approaches, philosophies, and everything. But the whole idea is this is a very just open, exploratory conversation where we start with the common ground that we are all committed to doing whatever it will take to save life on Earth and cool the planet, heal the world's ecosystems, et cetera, et cetera. So with that as just some brief introductory words from me, and now I'd like to hand it over to start with you, Mr. Allan Savory. Give us a brief introduction to yourself and your life's work, and then followed by Sailesh.
I started off being very concerned just with land and areas we were setting aside as future national parks in Africa when I was a young man. That was over 60 years ago, and just became very obsessed with trying to find solutions to a problem that was thousands of years old, and I just couldn't believe we couldn't solve it. And then that led to many things, and I realized we never could have solved the problem of failing civilizations and what's facing the world now. We never could have solved it in one country, one culture. No university or institution could ever have solved it. There were a whole lot of circumstances that had to fall in to play. A lot of that's described in the textbook that's in its 3rd edition. But where we are today is that from roughly 1984 on, we've known what was causing almost all that ails us, and had a way that people could begin to solve these problems. So that's been my lifelong work. But I come at it from a very different angle. I'm an independent scientist. And then over the years of working on it, I worked on it as a researcher, a biologist, a government. Before I became independent, I realized I couldn't do what I called honest science in an institution. And so I became independent, supporting myself and my family in any way I could. And I fought in a long, bitter guerrilla war in the army for over 20 years as well, and became one of the leaders of at the end of the war, we had 4 political parties and 3 armies in the field. And I was serving in one army and leading one of those political parties in the war. That's what got me into exile and back to the scientific work here. But although I was doing many, many things, I really was just changing caps every day, because poor land means poor people, social breakdown, upheaval, blaming of minorities. Eventually it leads to war and the collapse of civilizations. And now we're facing it globally. So it was always the same problem, but seen from many, many different angles as I worked on it. So that could only have come from a certain set of circumstances. And even getting forced into exile and bringing me over to the United States as it did, enabled further clues. And then it enabled me to work with about 2,000 scientists in the United States till we broke through with something that was working.
Wow, wow, beautiful. And we'll delve into that which is working in a bit. Next, I'd like to invite Dr. Sailesh Rao to give us an introduction and background. Welcome, Sailesh.
Thank you, Jamin, for this forum. I'm Sailesh Rao. I was born in India. I educated in India for my undergraduate, and then I came to the US to do my postgraduate studies. I am a systems specialist. I worked on, I got my degree in electrical engineering, and then I worked on the internet infrastructure for 20 years after my graduation. And during that time, I was responsible for converting the internet from a primarily analog communications backbone to a digital backbone. So that allowed it to run 10 times faster and be more robust at the same time. And then in 2006, I happened to see Al Gore's presentation on TV, and I was so shocked that I decided to quit my career and start working on the environment full time, because this is the biggest systems problem around. And I've been looking at it from a systems perspective. So I look at it from why are we in a situation where we are constantly looking for creating scarcity, because that's what is valued in the current system. And then how do you create a system, because we have currently a system of normalized violence, and how do we create a system of normalized non-violence in which we can all thrive? Not just human beings, but also animals and biodiversity can thrive. And so I began to see the connections between what is happening to animals in animal agriculture, and what's happening to people through colonialism, and what's happening to people through racism and patriarchy, and how they're all interlinked, and how we need to address it from a systems perspective, and so that we can solve these problems all together. It's impossible to solve them one piece at a time. So that's been my focus. And so I started Climate Healers in 2007. And the goal of Climate Healers is to reverse climate change and to bring us to a sustainable world. And And as part of that, I've been working on the Vegan World 2026 project, which is because we are literally, creating a system of normalized nonviolence, which is what vegans are all demanding. And it is one of the fastest growing social justice movements in the world today. And it's on track to reach there by 2026 anyway. So it's about making sure that there is a system in place to welcome the vegans as we become a majority.
Beautiful, Sailesh. Thank you so much. I'd like to just say a few words to kind of help put a little framing or context to this. Part of the context is I have traveled to see both of you in person and to participate at your respective conferences that you've held both in Colorado in the case of Allan and Arizona in the case of Sailesh. And I was drawn to both of you because of the quality of your work, the rigor of your work, and your passion and commitment. And I'm very honored to know both of you. And what's interesting is, we could just, get kind of cut right to the chase of this, what could be, but I don't want to be, a debate about whether we should have veganism or holistic land management using livestock in the innovative ways that you've pioneered, Allan. So, but instead of that, I want to really talk about two things that really all of us have in common. One is a passionate commitment to do whatever it takes to save life on Earth, including large transformational changes, transforming the livestock industry, transforming our diets. So we're all pulling fundamentally in the same direction. We want to save life on Earth, heal humanity, heal ecosystems, etc. So we have that in common. A second thing that we have in common is that if we look back in time at these vast ecosystems, the vast savannas of Africa, for example, those ecosystems were in balance before humans became this mega force. And we're now living in the Anthropocene, where everything is essentially characterized by humanity's failures and gigantic mistakes. But if we look back in time, these ecosystems lived and thrived in a dynamic balance that included grasses, bushes, trees, all kinds of vegetation, insects, pollinators, and yes, large mammals that would travel in bunches, performing vital ecosystem services, trampling the soil, eating the grass, et cetera, et cetera. And so and please correct me if I don't make a fair characterization of your respective viewpoints. Allan, your perspective and your pioneering work has been on essentially how do we get as close as possible to replicating that dynamic balance by reintroducing livestock. And please, you'll characterize it in your own words, and I'll let you speak next, Allan. Versus Sailesh, your approach has been, hey, let's all go vegan and simply return all this land to nature and let nature find its own balance absent humans. So I just wanted to comment that really we have a tremendous amount in common. And I really thank you both for just making this an open exploratory conversation. We have no time limits, at least as far as I'm concerned. And of course, we'll continue the conversation tomorrow. Allan, I know you have a lot to say, followed by Sailesh. So please, Allan, take it away.
Well, let me start by, if I may, just correcting you. I've just been writing another thing for an internet site where a lot of critics and supporters have commented on something. And I said, all of you, critics and supporters, have got the bull by the udder. And you have the bull by the udder there. The history, the origin of what led to developing the holistic framework was studying what happened, why national parks are deteriorating. Why are national parks today some of the worst examples of global desertification and climate change, when they're the best of management the Western world or the world knows how? So I was starting to study that literally way back in the 1950s. Now, because of that and tying it to where national parks are deteriorating, et cetera, to the animals, the animal behavior, That's the history of it. And then the Savory Institute now concentrates on the grasslands, etc., because that's where, if we are ever going to get governments and institutions and United Nations to take climate change seriously, we will get the biggest returns in helping humanity from the savannas, grasslands, seasonal rainfall environments of the world. That's where we can make the maximum gain in trying to balance or stop the climate instability and deal with the desertification. But that's not where it ended. When I came to the United States, the USDA, far-sighted people in it, commissioned me over a 2-year period to put 2,000 scientists through training, because they knew about the work I was developing. Americans had been watching it in Africa. In fact, a university here was already plagiarizing my work. And so I was asked to train these. Now, during the training of those 2,000 people on the developing holistic framework, all right, we finally broke through with the holistic management framework. So that is what we do. When you talked about holistic land management, that is like you having a glass of water in front of you, and it's ceased to be hydrogen and oxygen. It's now water. H2O have got together. And it's like me saying, Eamon, I'd like you to give me a talk about how to manage the oxygen in that water.
Gotcha.
All right? Humans are one species. We came from one source as a species. Right? We pretty well know that that was somewhere in southern part of Africa, and we won't get into that further, but we spread around the world. Now, humans and land, environment, are so bound that they're inseparable, and our cultures. So just think of humans for a moment and think of a pygmy in the Congo forests in Africa, think of an Eskimo, think of an Arab in the Sahara, think of an Aborigine, think of a person in Sweden. Now, they look different, their cultures are different, they're different colors, they're different sizes, they are so different. It's the same damn species. What produced that difference? The environment. An Eskimo could not have evolved in the Sahara. A pygmy, as you find in the forests in Africa, couldn't have developed in Sweden. Humans and our environment are totally susceptible. We're evolving as we talk. And we now are going to have soon over 50% of the world's population in cities. And we're now evolving to deal with magnetic, electromagnetic pollution, plastic pollution, chemical pollution. Our shape is changing, our fitness is changing, our diseases are changing. Technology is now the environment. Our dating patterns are changing. Everything is changing. Okay? Now, if you look at the economy, the only economy that can feed, sustain any community in the long run is the photosynthetic process. Green plants growing on regenerating soil. You cannot eat tourism. You cannot eat gold. You cannot eat shares. You cannot eat any of these things. At the end of the day, cities are made possible. Civilization is made possible. You can have a choir, you can have a church, you can have a religion because of agriculture. That has to be the basis of any economy. So you cannot separate economy, culture, and people. And we learned how to do that, as I said, by 84, and to deal with it. So what we have going around the world today is many people like Sailesh and many others with absolute good intent, struggling for solutions, like so many of us are. And what we have to offer is the simple idea that there is only one cause of everything that ails us. There is nobody out there doing anything to us. There are a few natural catastrophes, volcanic eruptions, tsunamis, etc. But you listen to the news, you watch what's happening, you watch the wars, the fights, the conflicts, the religious conflicts, all of this stuff. It is humans doing it to humans, all right? It is us doing it. Now, the single cause of this, if you talk to most scientists, institutional scientists, about what is causing the biggest problems facing us in the world, they will say coal and oil, livestock. That's why Sailesh and the vegan movement is trying to get away from livestock, because they are seen as responsible. But if we just use our common sense, which humans are capable of, but because of system science and complexity, we know that institutions are incapable of. That is common sense. So if we use our common sense, we quickly realize that, oh, coal and oil are resources. They've got large carbon molecules. Humans may need them for centuries to come to make many products, not just aspirin, not just burn them up as fossil fuels. It is management that determines to burn them up, calls them fossil fuels, right? Now, when you look at livestock, humans have run livestock for centuries. And no matter what we did, nomadic pastoralists, deeply understanding their connection to nature and the land, and with tremendous knowledge, they created the great biblical deserts of antiquity. And then you look at 100 years of modern range science and rotational grazing and all the grazing systems, they accelerated desertification. You can't blame the animals. It was management that did that. So I believe it's 100% unarguable that the cause of almost everything ailing humans today is management. And what we discovered is that there are two ways of managing. People believe there are thousands of ways of managing. There are libraries full of management books, universities, everything. But if you peel the onion and keep peeling the onion in any management, in any culture, through any time in society, in history, keep peeling that onion to where people actually made the decision. Because at the end of the day, you have to make a decision. We find it's identical through all cultures, all religions, all ages, all peoples. And it's all tool using animals. So there's no difference in the basic genetic way that humans make decisions from how an ape makes decisions, or a crow. It's genetically embedded. So even though I hardly know you, I can guarantee you that you made almost every decision in your life, all right, to meet a need, to meet a desire, or to address a problem. And so did every other human. And that is the cause of the problem. That's the cause right there. The world is complex, it's holistic. As I just said, humans are inseparable from the environment. We're managing complexity in human organizations, families, humans, each one of us, and our environment. And the human brain was not able to deal with that complexity. So when you read the work of Rebecca Costa, who wrote The Watchman's Rattle, she describes there from her research how early civilizations didn't fail just because of their agriculture, as we've long believed. She said they failed because their societies could not deal with the complexity of rising population and deteriorating environment. So they turned increasingly to their equivalent of religion, away from knowledge or science, towards sacrificing and so on, and shelved the problems for future generations. Well, the future generations couldn't handle it. And if you think about it, that's almost what we're doing globally today, certainly in America. People are turning against science into more and more faith-based stuff, and we're shelving the problems for future generations, in effect. So if we want to correct it, that's one point, is we have to work to a holistic context. Then we don't have conflict. So if we get people like me and Sailesh here, and we use the reductionist management that is universal, Sailesh and I, both sincere people, both having the same end of a better world, would in fact end in conflict. And it would not be his fault or my fault. It's the way human decision-making is done. In other words, we would look take that web of complexity and reduce it to the problem, and one answer would be to get 100% vegans. And somebody else would suggest another answer, and I might suggest another, and then we're in conflict. So the way we make decisions actually is the cause of most conflict. Now, with holistic management, we never talk about any practice because we don't know if it's good or not. So we would never talk about veganism or livestock or anything like that without a context. It would be like me saying to you, Evan, that I think I'm going to light a fire. See, it's an action. And you have no idea if it's wise or it's stupid until you say, Allan, why? What's the reason for the fire? And if I say, well, I'm going to light it in the fireplace because it's cold or I want to cook my food, it makes sense. If I'm writing it on the carpet yard, burn the house down. And we're doing that daily. We simplify, we reduce the web of complexity to a need, a desire, or a problem, and very little else, all right? And then we have experts give an opinion on that, and we end in conflict. And we haven't got a context. We've reduced the complexity. So that's why I sent you prior to this talk, the simple context that I use. It's just a generic one that most humans would agree to. And I wanted Sailesh to look at it and see if he agreed. And if he did, we'd say, okay, that's what we're trying to do. And that's what we completely agreed on. No compromise, no, because if people have to compromise, neither party is happy. Are we agreed that's the sort of world we want? And then we can say, now, what ideas do you have? And if somebody suggests an idea, like, let's take veganism, like, I think we should be vegan, then if I say bad idea, that person automatically, you've started conflict. I don't know if it's a bad idea until we look at it in the context of the complexity we're dealing with. When we look at it in the context, then that person and me or anyone else can see if it's a good idea or not. And if it's not, then we look for something else. But we can move now solving problems without getting into conflict. And that's essentially what we do with holistic management. So I've actually worked in one case in this country with a group of angry men swearing at me, telling me to F off back to Africa. I didn't know their community. It was impossible to have agreement. This was about the time of the Oklahoma bombings, when there was lots of anger. And with that group of men, I wanted to talk to them about love and caring and families. The context, I needed a context. And they would have just ridiculed me. So with them, I said, let's pack up the meeting. And they applauded. And then I said, would you work with me for 1 hour and prove me wrong? Instead of telling me I'm wrong. So they agreed to do that. Now, I wanted those men to talk about what was deeply valued. And they would have just ridiculed it, being typical macho bullshit males in this country. And so what I did was I handed out a piece of paper to everyone. And I said, by the look of you, you're all going to be dead within about 60 years, about 20 years, sorry, because they were older, most of them. And I said, I want you to be totally selfish and write on this paper, would like to see if you could come back into this community 100 years from now. But just be selfish, think only of yourself, and do that. They did, and we read out what was on the bits of paper. I still have the board that we had it on, a picture of it, and you couldn't distinguish who was a bureaucrat, who was a farmer, who was a rancher. They all wanted the same thing, and the atmosphere changed. And by the end of the hour, we had a holistic context. So I'd like for this discussion with you, Sailesh, if you're agreeable to it, that we work to the context that I sent you, and then have the discussion about veganism. It'd be great.
Right.
That way we won't argue at all.
Right. Yeah. So let me begin by telling you where I come from. I come from an engineering background. And as engineers, we are trained to look for the truth in science because we have to build things that actually work. And so I'm So I look at things from a holistic perspective. I look at problems. What are the problems and how do you solve these problems in a way that makes the system robust and impervious to attacks, so to speak. So when I look at the problems that we face in the environment, I don't say it is because of burning, coal, oil, or raising livestock. I say it's because we have a burning machine that's literally burning more and more every year. So because we have created a system in which growth is fundamental. Okay, and that growth is fundamental because of the way we create currency in the system. It's the game we are playing. Because as human beings, we tell stories and we play games. And the stories that we tell determine how we act. And, and the games that we play determine the rules that we use for acting. Okay. And the stories that we tell, if we tell a story in which we have actually created lots of problems and we have created a big mess on the planet, then we are always looking in the past to make corrections. And that kind of story is actually going to be detrimental for future progress. So we need to tell a story in which we do belong exactly as we are, and we have been doing something that is part of something much larger than us. So because we are in the context of a much larger ecosystem, which we think has no intelligence, and we are the only ones that have intelligence. And we also call ourselves Homo sapiens, and sapiens means wise. And I've never met someone who's wise who actually goes around saying is wise. Okay, so that itself begins with a very egocentric perspective of the planet, as if we are the only ones that have a monopoly on intelligence and wisdom, when actually the ecosystem is doing just fine. Thank you very much. Okay, so it created us as a species, and we spread from Southern Africa to all over the world. And in the current interglacial period, we started agriculture, and we kept the temperature constant for 10,000 years by deforestation and burning down forests. So we kept the temperature constant for 10,000 years. And then over the last 200 years, we've increased it by another 1 degree Celsius. And in the process, we have created all the tools and technologies we need to understand what we did, that we actually prevented another ice age from happening. And now we have the tools and technologies to become a climate regulator species for the planet. Whether we like it or not, the climate is in our hands. The health of the ecosystem is in our hands. We can continue doing what we are doing and destroy everything and destroy ourselves in the process, or we can transform ourselves to a caretaker species that no longer kills. Because currently we are a predator species. If you ask me what are the two major problems, I would say it is the burning machine, in which we are constantly burning and we want to burn more and more, and the killing machine, in which we are constantly killing and we want to kill more and more every year. Yeah, because that's the game we are playing. It's the game of money that has been monopolized by a few people who have appropriated for themselves the power to create more money. And they are literally colonizing the whole planet. Okay, that is what has happened now. And with that process, they have heated up the earth. We have heated up the earth, which was a good thing, which prevented the earth from going back to another ice age. Now we have to transform ourselves from this predator species to a caretaker species. And for that, we need to stop the killing machine and we need to stop the burning machine. Okay? And it is from a systems perspective, we know that we need to stop the killing machine first and then stop the burning machine. It's important to stop the killing machine because we have killed so much that we are on track to wipe out almost all of the megafauna on the planet within the next 6 to 7 years. That is the exponential rate of killing that's happening on the planet. Okay? So our population today, because of the growth mechanism that we have put into place in our economic system, our population today is 2.5 times the population or the weight of all the wild megafauna that lived 10,000 years ago. Just one species, we are so big that we have literally overwhelmed the biomass of every other wild animal. And on top of that, we are raising these farmed animals that have almost double our weight and who are eating 5 times as much food as we eat. Okay, so it's a completely unsustainable system. And so the only end result of that will be the destruction of all wildlife and the destruction of our species if we continue with the current course. But the vegan movement is also growing exponentially. And the vegan movement is saying it is not okay to kill animals unnecessarily for no reason whatsoever. Especially in an environment in which we have poured so much toxic chemicals that the animal foods we eat become the mechanism by which those toxic chemicals are returned back to us in the food we eat and that make us sick. So it's, and of course it makes the pharmaceutical companies very happy because it makes us sick. But that's also part of this growth mechanism that we have put into place. So by transforming the game we play, by transforming the story we tell first, by first telling a story in which we do belong exactly as we are, and we did all this in order to take over the reins of the climate of the planet, so that we can become the thermostat species that maintains the thermostat of the planet for the rest of creation, we now can start playing a different game, a game in which we no longer are colonized based on the color of our skin. We no longer have racism built in to the system. We no longer have sexism built into the system, and in which we consider things like racism, colonialism, patriarchy, and speciesism as unacceptable, in which we do treat each other as we say we are supposed to treat each other. See, we have our ideals are amazing. We have an ideal that all beings, all men are created equal. And we know that all men really means all beings are created equal. Okay? So let's implement that ideal. So whenever specifications and implementation don't match, as an engineer, I know that we are not facing reality, that we have something in reality that we have misunderstood. And so we have a specification in our country that all men are created equal. And yet we have some of the most unequal society in human history. That means that we have not taken into account reality correctly. We say that we have the inalienable right to life. And yet we have the most lethal killing machine in human history. So that also is a specification and implementation that are not in alignment. So I say that this is why I promote the vegan movement. The vegan movement fundamentally begins with the assumption that even animals have a right to life, to the pursuit of happiness, and to liberty. That we don't have to imprison them. We don't have to turn their bodies into delivery mechanisms for toxins into our bodies. We don't have to exploit them, because when we exploit animals, we say it's okay to exploit people who don't look like us.
Yeah, you're beginning to get
mechanism.
Into veganism, but we don't have a context to discuss it.
The context is
we're engaging in reductionist management.
No, it is the context is this larger story, the transformation of our story to a story in which we belong exactly as we are, so that we can move forward to become a caretaker species, and the larger game, transforming our game so that we are no longer playing the colonial game. I think colonialism is over. We need to end it. Yeah. I think racism is over. We need to end it. I think speciesism is over. We need to end it. And sexism is over. We need to end it. So we can create a system in which equality is built in from the outset. And people feel, not only do they feel that they're being treated fairly, but they also know that they're being treated fairly. And we can create a game like that. As a system specialist, I know that we can do that. And we can then start playing that new game. And when we play that new game in parallel with the old game, we change the behavior of people in the old game as well. Just like veganism is changing the behavior of corporations today. They're literally creating, vegan food and making it available to us. Even though they're not promoting veganism, they don't want to promote veganism. They know it is contrary to the current system. Because veganism is saying that we cannot exploit even animals.
But can we, I want to discuss that.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm aware of what vegans are promoting, and I'm terribly supportive of it in some respects. But if we just talk about it like this, we are ourselves indulging in reductionist management. What we need first is for humans to get together and determine what it is they want. Humans, everything you said was a result of management. Everything you said was a result of management. So I want to look at that management, because if we're going to, and I'm on your side, I want to heal those things, all right? And I've been at it a long time, trying to heal those things. So now what we learned was if we as humans first discuss what we want in a particular situation. Now we're discussing this so globally that I gave you a suggested one. May I read it out as a reminder?
Mm-hmm.
And tell me if you don't agree with us, because if you agree with us, then we have a basis to discuss veganism. As a good example, we could discuss anything else. So let me read it out. I believe this is true of most people, including you and me. We want stable families, living peaceful lives in prosperity and physical security, while free to pursue our own spiritual or religious beliefs. Adequate, nutritious food and clean water, enjoying good education and health in balanced lives with a time for family, friends, and community, and leisure for cultural and other pursuits, all to be ensured for many generations to come on a foundation of regenerating soils, ethical and humane consideration for all life and biologically diverse communities on Earth's land and in her rivers, lakes, and oceans. Would you agree that most humans want that?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay. Now, can we use that as the context? So we've got a problem, global climate change. We've got a problem.
We have multiple problems. You see, this is not just climate change is the problem. There is biodiversity loss, there's ecosystems collapse, there is chemical pollution, there is lots of problems. So,
let me continue. I said earlier, almost every problem facing humanity is due to management. Now I'm cutting it down to one problem which veganism is trying to solve.
It addresses all of them.
Well, it's trying to solve many, but one of them is climate change. All right, so now we've got a basis. If instead of reducing this complexity of humans, which you're so aware of, and you've spelt out as I did, instead of reducing it to the problems, be it colonialism or sexism or racism or climate change, instead of reducing it to the problem and saying veganism is the solution, let's look at veganism in the light of this context, that this is what humans want. Now, when we do, I think you were involved in the Cowspiracy movie. All right, so I looked at that as well. And now in that, there's the vegan movement is strongly promoted. Now, they went into the terrible treatment of animals in factory feedlots, mainstream agriculture, the terrible felling of burning of forests in Brazil to plant pasture, to raise animals, to go into confinement feedlots, the feeding them grain, etc. That, if people managed holistically, in the light of the context I've just read, nobody would be doing that.
I disagree though, because when we have to when we kill animals for food, we are not treating them nicely. Okay, number one. So no matter how you manage these, first of all, we're calling them livestock alone tells me that you're looking at it as a product. It's a stock. It's not. These are not stocks. These are animals. These are animals who have lives, who have relationships, who have families, who have feelings. They're not machines. They're not objects.
No, but
when we call them as livestock, we literally are treating them as objects, right? So secondly, right, so I say, in Cowspiracy, we looked at it from the perspective of environmental NGOs and why they don't talk about it.
Yes, but can I continue on that line that I was on,
Mm-hmm.
please? I did listen to you all the way through, because I need to get the line of thinking, and you need to listen to what I'm trying to say until I've said it. So we look at that terrible cruelty of animals. I am totally against that. Every sane person would be against that. It's resulting from the way policies are developed with a problem of feeding the world instead of in a holistic context. Now, you don't like them being called livestock. Call them animals, whatever you like. I had vegans talking to me a while back who objected terribly to the killing and actually said they objected to the raising of animals to be slaughtered. All right, now that's logical. It sounds terrible. And I said, do you actually mean the millions of people in cities raising cats and dogs to be taken to the vet to be slaughtered when they're old, when they're euthanized? Mm-hmm. They said, no, we don't mean euthanized. I said, well, you're killing them at the end. All animals die. All creatures die. We cannot stop it. And nature is cruel. If we do not humanely end our lives, me included, I hope somebody will humanely end my life if I can't do it, all right? Because nature's way is cruel. I have lived with that as a wildlife manager in Africa. I've had to watch 50,000 animals die of starvation because people who loved those animals didn't want any killed. Until finally I took one of my main critics out in the field and there were some impala staggering by, dying. I deliberately hadn't taken a rifle and I said to her, do you want to watch them die nature's way, or do you want to join me in putting them out, mercy killing? I only had a pick handle. She said, I'll join you. I killed them with a pick handle to put them mercifully to death because nature was so cruel. After that, she stopped criticizing me and started talking about maybe we need to look at humane deaths for animals. Almost when we look at livestock or animals, all right, if we go against them, well, let's look at veganism in the context I'm saying. If people want to be vegan for spiritual reasons, absolutely they're right. And if in this context I read out to you, it would be absolutely within that context, the freedom to pursue our own spiritual religious beliefs. Now, if they wanted to do it for dietary reasons, health reasons, it's absolutely their right. I personally wouldn't, because we've had billions of years of evolution and we are an omnivore. Okay, so I wouldn't do it myself, but I would reserve their right to it. Now, the moment we say we want people to be vegan to stop the killing, then that is not being ethical and it's not good for the environment.
Well, I disagree, because when we do that, when we say it's okay to kill animals for food, we are not waiting until they are old to kill them. We are killing them as their babies. as they begin their lives, right? We are killing them because we want their flesh. And it is unnecessary to kill them because there's plenty of nutrition outside. Vegans have been living for centuries now, and showing that it's not necessary to kill animals for our nutrition. Secondly, when we do that to animals, we start doing that to people. We have done that to people. And in fact, if we look at what the animal agriculture industry is doing today, it is appropriating land from native people to graze more animals. So we are destroying forests and taking their land away by telling them that their culture is inferior to our culture. And therefore, they need to get out. Can you please let me finish? Yeah? From the same courtesy that I gave you. Thank you very much. That is called colonialism. When you go and take away someone's land, saying that their culture is inferior to our culture and therefore they need to move out so that we can raise more animals, that is called colonialism. When we ask people of color and immigrants to go slaughter the animals so that we can eat them, and those people are being traumatized as they slaughter the animals, that is called racism. When we then impregnate these animals because we want them to be of the greatest stock, so to speak, so that they grow the fastest or they have the right genetic material for us, that is called patriarchy, because that is literally abusing the feminine of the animal. And that is what we do when we exploit animals for our purposes. So I'm saying that everything you said about our goals are perfect. We do want a world like that. But a world like that in which we are exploiting animals does not exist. It's exploiting animals for not for any necessity, but for our taste, but for our sensory pleasures, okay? It's not, this is not what happens in nature. In nature, predators eat animals. Predators kill animals, but they kill the weakest in the tribe. They catch the animals that it's easier to catch. No predator goes after the young animals that are running fastest, right? Because it's hard for them. Because in nature, there is always this conservation of energy. Animals are trying to minimize the amount of energy they need to produce something, to live their lives. So nature is beautiful that way. Nature has done her thing, and there is no need for us to intervene and to use our guns to end suffering and things like that. I don't see that as part of our vegan world in which we are.
Can I go back to where we diverted from what I was saying?
Mm-hmm.
All you're describing, I know, I am a wildlife biologist. I've spent my life dealing with animals, and most don't die from predation. Mm-hmm. Nature kills them with accident, disease, and predation, and none of them are pretty, particularly disease, and they die by the thousands because they have to die. Everything has to die. All right, now, if we are against killing animals as vegans, so you want me to be vegan and not kill animals, then I have to say to myself, well, it's not good for the environment. I'm going to come back to that, right? But it's not ethical, because what about all those people over the whole of North Africa, up through into China, Mongolia, etc., vast areas of the world, parts of America, South America, this continent, yeah. What about all those people that are living on land where you can't grow crops, you can't grow forests, you can't grow, only about 3% to 5% of the land can grow crops. The rainfall is way too low. The periods of dry are far too long. They have nothing they can convert that vegetation to food except animals. So now you're condemning those people to poverty, violence, emigration to Europe, continued desertification, continued climate change. Is that ethical?
Can I address that?
Yes.
There are examples of food forests being grown where people said nothing can be grown, where we have shown that we can do that. There used to be forests there, and we have destroyed it in the last 200 years, last 1,000 years. We have destroyed the forest and turned that into deserts. The deserts, if you look at where the deserts are, the major deserts, the Sahara Desert starts in the western edge of Africa and goes all the way into India and becomes the Gobi Desert, goes all the way into India and becomes the Thar Desert, goes all the way into China and becomes the Gobi Desert. And if you remember your history, that's exactly where the major civilizations of the world were. So it's the human beings created our civilization, and the deserts happened. How did they happen? Because we cut down the forests and we turned that into grasslands for raising animals. And we can reverse that. And if you go look at what is happening in India, in the Auroville, in Sadhana forest, where people have taken something that used to be bare rocks, hardly anything was growing, and they've turned that into a native forest that used to be there. So we have historical data. We now know that of the grazing lands of the planet, 41% of it used to be forests in 1800. And we know that we can bring those forests back with the right techniques. And when we do that, when we create food forests for people, this is what's necessary for us to regenerate life on the planet and to bring back the wild animals that we have lost. We have lost a lot of the wild animals. Wild animals are down 90% from what they used to be, 10,000 years ago. And we cannot continue doing what we are doing, taking away more of their land and creating more and more farmed animals for us to eat.
Yeah.
And
turning
them into...
I said that most of that land that is desertifying, all right, majority of it, or vast amounts of it, bigger than whole states here, is less than 200 millimeters of rain. It was never forest. You can't grow forests in it. It can't get tree canopy, woody vegetation dense enough to cover soil. Areas that I've worked in my life that we made national parks, we protected them totally. We didn't kill anything. There are big national parks around me in Africa, the Chobe National Park, the Zambezi National Park, the Luangwa, all of these big national parks. We are totally protecting them, doing everything that you would want to do as a vegan. They are shocking examples of global desertification and climate change today. And we're doing no killing.
Well, the national parks...
And the trees are dying. The trees are falling into the river, hundreds of years old trees where there are wrong riparian areas. And you are right, Sailesh. People have the ability to harvest water or runoff off big areas with swales and grow fruit forests. They do this. They're doing it in Jordan and other areas. The whole Nabatean civilization was based on water harvesting and irrigating like that. The entire civilization failed. It became desert because that doesn't work. It doesn't address the cause of desertification, which is oxidation of vegetation and sunlight. But it doesn't address that.
The national forests and the forest services are all legacies of the colonial system. And they always were designed to extract as much as possible from that land for the benefit of the colonizers. It has always been that way. The forest services in India were designed for that. So they were taking away old growth trees and replacing them with trees that would make timber for new ships to be built for the British Empire. So that is the legacy that we have in India, is forest management that was mainly about extraction And it has unfortunately continued because it is the same colonial system that we still have in the world today. I would suggest looking at projects like Sadhana Forest that I mentioned, where they're bringing back the original native forests in that region, and not growing eucalyptus trees or teak trees because they're good timber.
Yeah. Are you familiar with Bhubaneswar?
Yes.
Yeah, because I went to Bhubaneswar I worked with the forestry department.
Right.
Okay, and we got the forestry department to look at the forestry policies. They looked at 12 policies long after colonialism. All right.
Well, yeah.
Yeah, but we looked at 12 of their policies. They did, teaching them how to use the holistic framework. And they developed a holistic context that Indians would want, they would want, their families and everything. And they analyzed their own policies in the forests in Bhubaneswar. And they concluded, not me, that all of their policies would damage India, damage their communities, damage their economy.
Yeah, see, I also don't buy into the story that colonialism ended in 1947 in India. We were made to pretend that colonialism ended. In fact, it continued because colonialism still continues through the currency system, through the currency game that we are playing. It is the Bretton Woods arrangement after World War II that said, let's pretend to give them independence and let's continue the colonialism by other means. And that is really what has happened. And so the forest departments in India are still in the business of managing resources for economic growth because they are stuck in the same system. They have to return loans that they have borrowed from the International Monetary Fund or the World Bank. And so they are extracting resources and selling in order to return the loans that they have borrowed for development purposes. This is why India's main export is beef. Even though India has supposedly a rich culture of cow protection, but India is selling beef. India is selling animals, meat. And in fact, that's if you look at the latest budget that Prime Minister Modi proposed, he is proposing to grow the livestock industry, a so-called livestock industry.
Yeah, but I'd love to get back to solutions.
Right.
You know, because if we talk about colonialism, you and I are talking English now. Where does that language come from?
Right.
The most colonized people in the history of the world, they don't even speak their own language. English is such a mix of languages, but now it's spread around the world. Colonialism is gone. And, you know, I grew up in the colonies and part of the empire and all of that. All right, but one of the most horrifying books I read was The Fatal Shore. That's just the British cruelty to their own people, far crueler to their own people than they were to any British colony.
Oh, I agree. I think the British people are the most colonized people in the world.
Yeah, we need to move beyond that to solutions. And that's what I think.
I don't say, you know, if you frame it as colonialism is over, there are going to be a lot of people who are going to be very upset because it is not over. No, people are still colonized.
What I'm saying is if we obsess ourselves with colonialism, we're running out of time. Young people like Greta Thunberg are appealing to world leaders to take action.
Right.
We're running out of time, and we don't have the time to deal with each problem like colonialism, this, that, and the other, and all these problems when they're coming from one source. Management.
No, the source is violence. See, the source is the violence. We come from a system of normalized violence. That is where the colonialism is coming from. That is where the killing of animals is coming from. That's where the slaughterhouses are coming from. That's where all of these things are coming from. And this is what Gandhi tried to solve. That's what Martin Luther King tried to solve. It's just to create a system of normalized nonviolence in which peace is normal, which is exactly what you asked for. You wanted a system in which peace is normal.
Yes, but what I'd like to do is not theorize about all these things. We don't come If one person could theorize we come from a system of violence, others would say we come from love. I don't believe in violence. I've had to live with a lot of violence. I've had to deal with it, but I've dealt with it by love of animals, love of people.
Exactly.
Right? And
Yes.
I want desperately to talk about how do we solve it? How do we, you know, the Greta Thunbergs of this world are appealing for global leaders to take action. A lot of people accusing them of inaction, lack of political will, etc. Mugabe, who was, when he was prime minister of Zimbabwe, when it first got its independence, made a brilliant statement. He said in a public speech, he said, we do not have a bigger problem in Zimbabwe than our rising population and our deteriorating environment.
Right.
He said, we politicians don't know what to do.
That's the game, right?
Yeah, the only thing we can do is to take the advice of our professional advisors. When it goes wrong, we get the blame. And that's exactly the global situation we're in. You've seen COP25 in Madrid recently break down in chaos and confusion. We've got the UN Sustainable Development Goals that are almost all just dealing with symptoms of desertification. So I want to discuss how do we help these young people and these global leaders deal with this? We will not help them deal with it if we theorize a lot and argue a lot about every problem.
No,
particularly when they're all coming from one source.
Right. You talked about love of animals, right? Or love of anyone. When you love someone, you don't kill them. You don't kill them when they don't want to be killed.
You do. I differ with you. I have had to cry my bloody heart out, killing my dog that I loved. My last two dogs lived for 14 years, working dogs with me. I put them out of their misery. I did it myself rather than have someone else do it. I cried and cried and cried. All right. I did it out of love. I killed them. All right. And I hope somebody will do that for me, because nature can be terribly cruel. So don't say we don't kill out of love.
Well,
I've done it.
That's not the kind of, I'm not talking about, I'm talking about killing animals that don't want to be killed. That they're no longer, these are animals that were born. That we kill chickens that they're born and we kill them because they're useless for us. We kill animals before they reach their puberty, because that's when the meat is tender. This is the kind of killing I'm talking about. And I do agree with you that in the future, in a vegan world, we don't really need pets anymore, because we are going to be living in the wild with animals.
I'm trying to tell you, I'm trying to get it over with you that if it's a vegan world, it won't be. There won't be a vegan world. Why? Because
I think your understanding of veganism may be.
Let me explain why.
Right.
Because you will not be able to stop desertification. Period.
I don't agree with you on that.
I know you don't agree. That's
right.
Why. Would you let me explain it?
I don't know if we are going to come to an agreement. If you can explain it to me.
Lots of people don't agree with me.
Yeah.
If I may interject just for a moment. Sure. First of all, this is a wonderful conversation, and I really want it to continue. And I really commend both of you for being open to points of view that are very different from your own. If we as a species are going to make it, I believe it will be because we agree to come together and listen to each other and work through it. We may not get through it in one conversation. We also have tomorrow. We'll have many other opportunities. But let's the three of us set an example for openness and exploration and co-creation. So you're both doing phenomenally well. I don't really want to talk. I just want to listen. So let's really create space for each other and know that this conversation does not have to end.
Okay. Tell me why do you think that veganism cannot solve desertification?
Well, because it is spreading the what I call the vilification of livestock movement, the killing of animals that cannot go on, etc. You know that. All right, now with the only thing, what the vegan world, what you're trying to do is you're trying to end desertification, end climate instability, all right? And we're a tool using animal. So you can use, and I can use all the creativity in the world. We cannot do anything. Cannot do anything. Can't even drink a cup of water. If I say to you, drink water now, the only way you can do is to go to the nearest river and drink with your hands and mouth if you don't use technology. So we can have all the creativity in the world, we can do nothing with it. We can have all the money in the world and we can do nothing with it. You cannot do anything with money until you pay for labor or pay for some technology, a tool. So we can have all the labor, all the money, all the creativity in the world, and we cannot even drink water. Okay, we're a tool using animal. Now, you in vegan movement are going to have to, like all of us, address global desertification. If you don't, you cannot address climate change, all right? As a woman I heard lecturing years ago said, she said, viewed from space over the last thousands of years, you would describe humans as a desert-making species. And you said it yourself earlier, how the deserts have been spread. All right, you've got to stop that. Now, you're a tool using animal. What tools are you going to use?
Okay. So have you gone to a place where people have converted deserts into forests and a vegan community?
Nobody has, just small areas in a big expanding desert. No desert being expanded, converted to a forest.
So I suggest you go to places like Southern Forest and look at what they have done.
Yeah, I've been to that. I've been to the forest in Israel, their big pride and joy, and it's not regenerating. But that is using technology.
Right. I'm not suggesting we stop using technology.
Okay, so
I'm a technologist.
name one tool.
So
what other tool do you have?
Well, they are using, earth-moving equipment to create holes, swales. Yeah.
That's technology.
Right. Yes.
Name another tool.
Why do you want me to name tools?
Because you've got to solve desertification problem as vegans.
Right.
And you've got to use a tool. So you've got one tool, technology, you've named. Name your next tool. What's the next tool?
Planting trees.
That's technology.
Right. What other tools do you need?
Well, you do. You're a tool using animal. It's a biological problem, and it's got to be solved with a tool. And for 99.9% of human existence, we only had technology and fire. Our first technology, like all tool using animals, was sticks and stones. We could chip the stones, we could sharpen the sticks, and we could not affect our environment.
Mm-hmm.
Then we got a second tool about 1 million years ago, fire. Then we could go into the copper, the bronze, the Iron Age, and our tools could expand to where we could put a man on the moon. We can use this computer to talk to each other now, all made possible by fire. Everything in the room around me, everything, including my clothes, made possible by fire. So for 99.9% of human existence, 2 tools. And there's no tool there that can stop desertification. Now what are you going to do?
Well, that you made a categorical statement that there is no tool that can stop desertification.
No tool there.
No tool. I've shown you examples of tools being used.
You haven't shown me examples. You've talked about people planting trees. It's no good planting trees where the rainfall is 100 millimeters a year.
They are planting trees in situations like that and bringing back see. Trees are. Let me explain. Do you understand the
$30 billion? I looked at $30 billion worth of desalinating water, irrigating, and planting trees recently in the United Arab Emirates, and the desert sand is just blowing through. The Chinese have planted billions of trees, and now up to 250,000 tons of sand is dumped on Beijing some days. It's not working. Planting trees cannot possibly solve desertification problem.
It is
So
not
we've got
working in the
technology, and we can
system
plant
that we are
plants.
in. The current system that we are in is about extracting from nature to make more money for a few people.
Yes,
And that's
but
not going to work in that system.
no,
So
can I keep on, forget extracting. We're not trying to extract. You've got to stop desertification expanding, all right? We're a tool using animal, and as vegans, you've got technology to plant grasses, shrubs, or trees, develop swales. The Nabateans were doing it 2,000 years ago. No civilization got it to succeed. A few people, like in Jordan, are doing it on small areas of land where they reclaim 20 hectares in millions of hectares of desertifying land. That's not working. So now we've got the young Greta Thunbergs of the world. What are you vegans going to do? You've got those two tools, and the only other, I'll give you one more, the only other idea of a tool that humans have thought of was about 10,000 years ago. They thought of the idea of resting the environment to let it recover. That probably began with crop farmers rotating their crops, or it began with pastoralists trying to rest the grasses to let them recover. But the idea developed, and it's embodied today in the conservation movement. That's what we're doing in our national parks that are now turning to desert. Because conservation works wonderfully over most of India. It works wonderfully on the east and west coasts of America, in France and England, anywhere where the humidity is fairly even throughout the year. If you look at the rainfall of London, the rainfall of Johannesburg, they're about the same, but they're very different climates, all right? So when we look at most of the world, where you can get 3-4 months of rain, doesn't matter how much or how little, and then you get 8, 9, 10 months of dry season, all right? That is where it is desertifying. And resting the land to let it recover, it doesn't. We find the ruined civilizations that we abandoned thousands of years ago under desert sand. If we look in Yucatan or Mexico, whatever, we find the ruined civilizations that were abandoned under recovered jungle. So resting the land, our third tool, is the most powerful tool we have and that vegans have to restore biodiversity and full functioning of our environment in the humid environments of the world. Over the bulk of the world, about 2/3 of the world, it is one of the most destructive tools we have. So now we've technology that cannot solve the problem, fire that is causing the problem, burning, and we've got conservation that is causing and leading to the problem. So again, my question now is, if we're going to solve this, if we're going to give guidance to global leaders, what tool do vegans propose to use to address climate change?
Okay. When we cut down forests, do we not change the climate?
Of course you do.
Yes. Because forests create their own rain.
Yes.
So they basically are recirculating machines, water recirculating machines.
Yes.
And the more you cut down the forests, the more you desertify land, because you're going to turn that recirculating machine around.
No, not necessarily. Not necessarily. Because
this is exactly what's happening in the Amazon. You know, the Amazon now has fires. It used to be a rainforest.
Correct. And if you rest it, it'll go back to forest.
You rest it, it'll go back to forest. But instead, we are pouring GMO. You're creating, pastures, and then we are pouring Roundup and creating GMO soy to feed.
That's all wrong. Cattle. That's all management that is causing climate change.
Exactly. So now, can we not do the opposite? As we grow more trees, as we grow more forests, it will bring back the cycle so that the climate changes and you'll get more rainfall. This is the reversing of the process of desertification. And it has to be done in scale. You cannot just do 20 hectares and say, oh, see, it didn't work. You have to do it in scale. Greta Thunberg asking the leaders of the world to solve the problem is not going to do it, because the leaders of the world are stuck in the same old system of normalized violence.
Yes,
They are part of the same system of normalized violence.
Yep.
It has to be a grassroots movement that changes things from below.
Sailesh, I'm agreeing with you. Can you answer a question? I have millions of hectares of teak forests, Baker plurijuga, the teak forests in Africa. They're bigger than whole states. Yeah, they surround my home. All right, they are turning to desert. There are millions of trees. What would you suggest I do? Should I plant more trees? There are millions of trees, and it's turning to desert because
I've
it's
seen,
a rainfall environment.
Teak forests in India. Teak was all planted by human beings there because they wanted more lumber
Different
for their
species.
ships.
That's why I said this is Baker plurijuga, not the Indian teak or the Burmese teak. This is the Rhodesian teak.
Yeah, and it was built to, it was planted to grow, to build more ships to fight the French or whatever, right? And so it is not the original native forest in that region.
No, but my question is, what would you do in our forests in Africa that are our indigenous teak and mukwa, and they're dying on their feet? They're not regenerating.
We have to look at the whole ecosystem, including which animals are there.
To use a tool.
Which animals are there, which animals used to be there, and why are they not there anymore?
Well, the animals
so it's a system.
I can tell you what animals are there. There are buffalo, there are elephants, there are some giraffe in the fringes, there are kudu, zebra, impala, reetbuck, duiker, steenbok, grijsbok, baboons, hyenas, leopards, lions, jackals. We have them all, but it's turning to desert.
I do not know. I have to look at that condition, you know, and I'm not an ecologist. I'm not telling you that I have the solution to all the problems, but I'm saying that the solution is not to turn them into grasslands and raise cows on them. That is not the solution. Well, just so that we can eat them.
I'm asking you.
Yeah.
But that's what I'm asking.
I do not know the exact conditions of what your situation is.
Let me give you another example. Let me give you another example. I lived for many years in Albuquerque, and the Rio Grande River flowed past just not a mile from my home, right? There we have the Aldo Leopold Memorial Forest. So this is a memorial forest to Aldo Leopold in a riparian, riverine area flowing through Albuquerque. And they're having to plant cottonwood trees, and it's turning, the land is bare, the bulk of the soil, eroding, devoid of life. Now, what are you going to do in the Aldo Leopold forest in United States? What are you going to do? That's what I'm trying to get you to answer. Vegans have to have an answer to that if they're going to condemn animals.
Well, I'm not saying that I have the answer to Aldo Leopold's forest or the Yellowstone forest or whatever by just talking to you right now. You know, I'm not going to come up with an answer right away. It has to be something that we have to look at systemically. But the answer is not going to be to introduce more invasive species that we can eat and that we can take the biomass out of the forest and poop it into our sewer system. That does not solve the problem, right? That is just taking more and more nutrients from the soil and put it into the bottom of the ocean. That's what we are doing today. Half of the US is being used to just raise animals for food.
No, it's being used to grow food, to raise animals that shouldn't be in factory feedlots, shouldn't be cruelly.
They are in factory feedlots.
Shouldn't be going to the slaughterhouses. They are. I'm in agreement with all that.
But yeah, no, but they're being grazed right now. And then
what you need to be doing is not vilifying the animal. It is the management.
Right. I'm not vilifying that. It's not the animal's fault at all.
We cannot get vegans to criticize the management.
Well, I mean, I do agree with you that it's the management that's the problem. The management is for the benefit of a few people. That's what is happening right now. It's about extracting resources from land in order to funnel wealth to a few people. Well, that is colonialism.
You say the management is for extractive purposes, etc. That's why I used the example of national parks. If we pick national parks as an example of the management I'm talking about. All right? You cannot blame greed. You cannot blame corporate greed. You cannot blame agriculture. You cannot blame the economy. You cannot, what can you blame when national parks are contributing to climate change?
Well, the national parks are devoid of animals.
Look at is the management.
The animals that used to be there, they're devoid of these animals, because as soon as the animals come out of the park and eat some food that belongs to humans, we kill them. We have an entire bureau that's running around with helicopters shooting animals and killing them. Okay, they're killing wild horses, they're killing predators. We showed all that in Cowspiracy. So we are managing.
Yes, but in Cowspiracy, you showed that, and I said it's very good. What you exposed about mainstream institutional stupidity, cruel, inhumane treatment of animals is good. But in Cowspiracy, I went to they showed a pre-filming of it in Albuquerque before it was released. I was in the audience. And so I watched Cowspiracy and the statement about Allan Savory and how you couldn't possibly believe somebody who was responsible for killing 40,000 elephants. And I was just brushed off, all right? Now, when the film was over, the two guys that produced the film came out on the platform and spoke to the crowd, etc. And they talked about how they had interviewed me and so on and so forth. And so I actually stood up in the audience and said, well, by the way, here I am. I'm here. And I publicly invite you now to come and interview me, because they never had. And the next day they came to my home, and some of the other people from the town came to my home. We had a very constructive meeting, and they agreed. They had never interviewed me. They just completely condemned any hope of solving climate change or anything else in holistic management, wrote it off on that one thing, and which is vilifying animals. And the point I'm trying to get to you is, if vegans will look at the management, which is the problem, you will stop vilifying animals and being unethical to all the people in the world who have no way of surviving except through animals. It'll be stop being unethical to animals, which all have to die, and nature's death can be terribly. You haven't had to, like me, watch 50,000 animals die of starvation and disease. I've had to do that.
I've had to watch a lot.
And I'm
of
trying to
people
prevent it happening. And that happened because of kind, good people that called me a terrible person because I wanted to humanely kill.
There is no way to humanely kill someone who does not want to die. Okay, so I've had to watch people in India die of starvation. Okay, I have seen that. I've seen people who are dying because they are raising animals on land in order to send food to rich people in cities so that they can get a little bit of money, so that they can buy some things. That's because that's the only thing the rich people want from them. So it's literally colonization of these lands by people who are not there. Okay, that's causing the animals, that's causing the land to become infertile. And so these people are dying of starvation.
Sailesh, have you ever been with some Buru or Maasai pastoralists and see how they know every animal, how the animals come up and nuzzle them, how they put ash and dust their animals and brush them every day and look after their animals, how they love their animals, and how when they do have to kill an animal, it's a humane ending to its life. And I've worked with thousands of ranchers and farmers and pastoralists. They love their animals. They raise them humanely. My daughter's just done that here with 2 steers. She raised them their lives. They had idyllic lives, and then they were humanely killed.
Idyllic lives for what, 15 months or 18 months, when they live for 25 years normally, and then we kill them. So it is not, we take away, we had done that to slaves too, right? We have told them you have an ideal life.
What are you going to say to mothers whose children are starving in Somalia or in these areas where you cannot grow crops? You cannot, the vegetation is such that it can only be converted to food through cattle, goats, sheep, wildlife, etc. What are you going
If
to
you
say?
can, if you can
Famous
grow
people
food
that
for
you
cattle,
they
you,
have to eat.
this is exactly what Sadhana Forest wants to do. They have gone to Haiti. They were creating food forests in Haiti. They want to create food forests in Kenya. They want to create food forests in India. We can create food forests. This is what they want to do in
Yes,
places
food
where
forest can only be done where you've got 600 or more millimeters of rain. Have you ever
Haiti,
been out in these dry areas of the world where there's 200 millimeters of rain? You can't grow a food forest.
you can create systems that bring back the rain.
How?
See,
How? That's
ultimately,
what I was asking you
this is
earlier.
exactly how this is the reverse of the process by which we took away the rain. We took away the rain that used to be there. Okay, this used to be a very green planet, and we took away the rain. How? By cutting down the forests.
No, not by cutting down the forest. That was in some areas, and you can read about it in Herodotus, etc. But vast areas, like I've said to you, I live in them, teak forests that are millions of hectares. Nobody has cut down the forest. There are millions of trees, and it's turning to desert. So it's no good talking about growing food forests.
You are saying that
We
those
need
forests used
stop
to
the
exist for
global-
millions of years or thousands of years.
Hmm?
They used to exist for thousands of years, right?
Correct. That's how the teak forests developed. They developed
Well,
on Kalahari sands.
so if they existed for thousands of years, why are they turning to deserts now?
Because we haven't got enough animals.
Exactly. Not which animals? The
Any
native
animal.
animals of
And
that ecosystem, not some invasive species that you come and put in there.
there's
Okay.
no invasive species on this planet yet. Species have been spreading around the world always, all right? There are no invasive species. That's a bureaucratic term, not a scientific term. If they set a date, if a plant or an insect arrived a week before, it got its green card. If it arrived a week later, it's invasive and it didn't get a green card. That's a bureaucratic term. That's not science. Science is that species are spreading always. We shouldn't encourage it. We're aware of the dangers with disease and everything.
Right.
But once a species arrive, because of complexity, nature adjusts and you have a new species in the community. And if it doesn't have suitable environment, it dies out. All right. Now, when you say bring back the species that were there, we can't do that. North America, there are about 11 large mammals today.
Mhm.
There used to be 40 more large mammals in North America. They became extinct when humans arrived with language, organizing capability that other primates didn't have, spear and fire, and they're gone, they're extinct. Now we've got to do it with whatever animals we have. So we are doing it, and we're doing it all over the world now. And people are learning how to use animals as long as they manage holistically and change the management. And then we use a planning process, and whatever animal we can get, whether it's a duck or a guinea pig, a goat or a zebra, or whatever animal we can get, we are restoring the environment. Because only animals can do it. No technology, even imaginable, can ever do it. The reason I said to you is because of oxidation. If you lived with me in Africa, and you're welcome to come anytime you want to, you'll see that I live in a home with a thatched roof. And we've got all thatched roofs. Now, some of our buildings have been up for 30 years. If you look inside the roof, the thatch is a yellow color, the color the grass was the day it died, 30 years ago. If you look on the outside of the roof, where it's in sunlight, it's dark black. What is that? That is oxidation. Now, fire is oxidation. It's rapid oxidation.
Mhm.
Now, this oxidation that's occurring on that occurs all over the world in sunlight when you get these long dry periods. So if you come here to Florida, it's like much of India. You can bare the ground, you can put chemicals, you can do whatever you like, it'll cover up. I photographed just yesterday glass notices with lichen growing on the glass in a national park here. Now, if you go to where I live in Africa, the opposite occurs. Nothing would grow on that glass. what happens there is when plant material dies, it doesn't break down biologically with mostly insects and microorganisms. It has to go through the gut of an animal and come out as dung and urine. That's a major part of the breakdown. And it has to break down in 3, 4, 5, 6 months before the next rains. Otherwise, the land starts to turn to dust.
Okay.
Now,
Let
we
me ask you
cannot
something.
correct that with technology. We cannot correct it with fire. Resting the land causes it. And that's why I'm saying to you as a vegan, please tell me, be constructive, how are you going to address climate change?
With animals that
Ah,
are not being killed and eaten by human beings. You see,
all right.
because
Okay.
you understand that
Let's say
as
we
an
agree that
ecologist,
far. Let's say we agree that
may
far.
I continue?
Yeah.
As an ecologist, do you agree that as a predator species, the prey that you're preying on should have much larger biomass than the predator? Otherwise, it's not sustainable.
Yeah, the prey species, we know that, yeah.
Yes. So if our species is now 2.5 times the biomass of all the wild animals that lived 10,000 years ago, then, and we want to be a predator species, and we are creating this artificial biomass that is double our weight, and that's eating 5 times as much food as we eat, and destroying the wild animals so that they are just 4% of the total biomass on the planet in terms of mammals. And we are destroying them to the point where biodiversity is just disappearing in front of our eyes. Is it not time for us to start becoming a non-predator species, a caretaker species?
Well, can I point out there, we're not a predator, we're an omnivore.
Well,
part of
an
our-
omnivore that's a predator, because
Well,
we are
we're
eating.
Scavenging, if you want to be correct, we're an omnivorous scavenger that turned predator when we acquired large brain, spear, and fire.
We are perfectly capable of living as a herbivore. Okay, we are perfectly capable of doing, this is what vegans are showing day in and day out.
Okay,
We're perfectly capable of being a caretaker species that does not have to eat animals for any
let's
purpose
assume we
whatsoever.
are for a moment. I want to get, okay, so now you agree you'll stop vilifying animals.
Yes, I don't vilify animals at all.
All
I mean,
right,
I'm
so
a vegan. I
start-
love animals.
Correct, but you're leading a movement in the world that is vilifying animals and dooming humanity.
I do not, oh no, I think you have a misunderstanding of vegans completely. You misunderstand us. We are not vilifying animals. We are not dooming humanity. We are doing the opposite. We want to regenerate life. We want to celebrate every animal. We want to celebrate human beings.
Now, cowspiracy turned people against animal production of any sort.
Yes, production of animals, yes. Just like we are against production of human beings
now,
for a purpose, you know.
All right, so you've said now you're against production of animals of any sort. So now, if we're going back to this context we said, and we want all people with stable families living peaceful lives in prosperity, adequate nutritious food and clean water, you said you agreed to that. Mm-hmm. That's what we're trying to achieve. All right, so now let's assume that we don't ever kill animals again. All right, now we use millions of cattle, sheep, goats, because other species have gone now, and we start reversing the desertification of the world, and it's going to take millions more animals to do it, and we do that, and we're reversing the desertification of the world. How, if we do that, and I'm seeing you agree with that, how are we going to feed these people all over the lowest rainfall, vast areas of the world? How are we going to feed those people?
You start with the lowest rainfall, vast areas of the world where you are hypothesizing that nothing will grow. And I'm saying that's not true.
No.
Things can grow, right?
No, don't misquote me. I'm not hypothesizing that nothing will grow. Grasses do grow, right down to 50 millimeters of rain. Shrubs and so on grow. I said trees, tap-rooted dicotyledonous trees. You cannot get a full canopy and soil cover under about 500 to 600 millimeters of rain. Vast areas of the world are under that. And lots can grow, but it's mainly grassland. And it dies if it doesn't have enough animals. So now we've agreed we're going to put lots of animals. It's going to take millions of animals to do it. We get them out of feedlots. We get them out on that land, and we start healing the land, as people are already doing in 50 hubs on 6 continents. They're beginning to do it. Now we do that.
First of all,
my question to you, for those people that want stable families living in peace, etc., they're going to fight, they're going to kill each other over food. How are we going to feed them where vast areas cannot grow crops?
it's, I'm not suggesting that we go right there first and turn them all vegan right now. I'm saying we're talking about people in cities who are ordering food, who are basically making someone else do the work for them, right, to create food. That's where the movement is beginning.
Killing. You're talking about not killing.
Right. I'm saying not killing. First of all, when you create when you're restoring the ecosystem, you're not trying to create an ecosystem that has 6 times as much biomass that it used to have, right? So you don't have to start with all these farmed animals, these domesticated animals that we have genetically modified for our own consumption purposes, not for any ecological purpose, just to consume. We have made them grow really, really fast.
No, just before you go off on a tangent there, just trying to help the young Greta Thunbergs of this world. You've got whole countries right across North Africa. I'm saying to you, you've agreed you're not going to vilify animals, so we can use animals.
Use them. Don't vilify them doesn't mean I use them.
No, but you've agreed we can use animals because nothing else can save humanity now.
Animals are part of any forest. Animals are part of any ecosystem.
I'm talking about forests. I'm talking about grasslands.
Grasslands have grazers.
Correct, and they don't have grazers. They're dying. They're dying.
What happened to them? Did we kill them and not replace them with our cows? Did we not do that?
We've killed off most, as I said. There used to be 40.
Stop the killing is my first stop. My first thing is stop the killing. And like when we bring back the wolf in Yellowstone, you see how the wolf enhanced the Yellowstone National Forest?
Yes, I predicted that. I spoke in Yellowstone before it happened, about 5 years or more before. Right. I was asked biologists by them there, what could we do about the dying willows on the rivers? I said, there's nothing you can do. It will continue. The only thing available to you is to reintroduce the wolf. 30 years later, I read about how this was the most exciting discovery in ecology for decades. Yes. The wolves were back and it was beginning to recover. Right. I'm fully aware of that. I've worked on that for so many years.
Right. So it's exactly the same.
I'm trying to say to you that if we're going to feed millions of people, heal the deserts, address climate change, have a peaceful world where people can follow what we agreed we read here, that's what I'm trying to work to, not any side issue. If we're going to do that, we're going to need millions more animals on the land.
Not millions more. We already have plenty, right? Sorry? We have billions of animals that we are putting in feedlots right now, and we're killing them.
We said that. We said we're going to have to get them out of feedlots. We're going to get them back on the land. We're going to need millions more, I'm saying, right? We're going to need all over Australia, North Africa, the Indian deserts, the Pakistan parts of the world. We're going to need millions more animals on the land to address climate change and feed people. So I'm just asking you, if we don't allow humane killing, how are you going to prevent war by starving people?
Well, there is war now because of these animals. This is not the other way around. You're saying if unless we have millions more animals, we will have war. We already have war. We have plenty of it.
No, I didn't say that. Please listen carefully. I didn't say we'd have war if we had millions more animals. I said we need millions more animals to address climate change and desertification.
I don't agree with that.
And I said, if you don't allow killing of animals to feed people, then you're going to have war.
I'm not saying I don't allow killing of animals. If people in the Maasai are going to kill animals, this is not a problem for me right now. I'm not interested in changing them. I'm only interested in working with people who are trying to regenerate forests, where forests can be regenerated first, where we currently are destroying those forests and raising animals. There are billions of animals already there, all over the place.
And I know, and I'm agreeing with you on that.
They only go into feedlots after they're finished grazing.
Correct.
They're only going to feedlots for just 3 months before they're killed off.
I know that, and that's why I'm fighting that harder than you are.
There should not be these animals being...
I'm fighting it at the root cause, which is management. Stupid reductionist management that goes into Brazil and believes that you can fell forests, burn tropical wet forests, put cattle in there to feed. It's stupid. I've said so. I'm fighting that.
Right.
No,
but you don't fight that by putting more animals on the land. We cannot do that. We cannot do that.
Fight it by putting more animals on that land. You fight it by putting more animals on the land outside of that, in Brazil and South America, which is desertifying because of a lack of animals.
There is, any place where there is no food for the animals to eat and you go put more animals there, you're not going to get them to regenerate land automatically. If that's your example, I'm sure that it's contrary to science at the moment. It's contrary to the scientific results that people have published. So anyway, Jamin, you had something to say?
Oh, yeah.
You said you can't put animals on the land where there's nothing. When I began, Sailesh, I had a big ranching company, Liebig's Brookbond, British-based company. They were at one time, I think, the biggest ranching company in the world, and they came to me for help because their ranch in Rhodesia was desertifying terribly. And I said to them, look, everybody in the world says I'm wrong. I cannot ask you to take risk. You've got 60,000 cows on this ranch and it's turning to desert. And they said, well, what do you want to do? I said, if you want my advice, you want me to work with you, I said, what I suggest is we take the worst land you can find. Give me some of that. Let me show you what we can do with animals. And if you like it, we continue. They selected 4,000 acres. It was the worst land we could find in the whole country. Thousands of animals had died of starvation. I offered Glyn Richards, the chairman of the Rhodesian cattle growers, I offered him a £5 note, that's about $10 at the time, if he could show me a single grass plant in a 100-mile drive. Okay, we had nothing but scattered trees in that savanna and bare ground. They gave me 4,000 acres. I said, right. I put in one water point and designed how we would plan the grazing, and I doubled the number of animals immediately on what they had previously been able to carry. I proved wrong, and we went to 3 times the number of animals.
Okay, Allan.
We went to 3 times the number of animals. That ran for 8 years, and we just grew solid perennial grassland. And then the ranch went ahead on the rest of the ranch. So we've tested these things long ago. That's 50 years ago.
Why are there all these scientific papers showing that doesn't compute? There are all these scientific papers showing that what you're saying cannot happen.
It's not
basically, you're saying that there was no food for the animals to eat, but you doubled the animals on that land and then food showed up. How is that possible?
Let me explain it to you. It's possible if I had the room you're in, all right? And it had so little vegetation, a few weeds, a few leaves falling off trees, it may be 1,000 hectares, whatever it is, all right? And it could only support 2 goats. It had so little food on that land, but it's supporting 2 goats. Now, if I divide the room in half, it can support those 2 goats on half the room for 180 days. Now, if I divide the room into quarters, it can support those 2 goats on a quarter of the room for 30 days. That's letting the remaining plants in the rest of that grow for 270 days. It's a time factor. So all I did was to divide the land up, treble the number of animals, and plan their movements, and their hooves, the dung, the urine, plants began to grow. That was done 50 years ago. And you said there are lots of papers proving me wrong. There isn't a single one.
Well, there are so many, Alan.
No,
Basically,
no,
they have
there are
found
many
that the
papers.
animals do a really good job of distributing themselves and eating the food to get the same, more amount of vegetation. The animals do a good job of it. You don't have to confine them and then move them around. That's what papers have. There are so many papers that are out there. I actually showed a few in my webinar. I can send you.
Yes, you can send them, but it's wasting time because animals spread. Animals spread, we know that. And when they spread, they overgraze plants and they overrest the land. And that causes desertification. So yes, there are thousands of papers published by PhDs, thousands, and there's not a single one that even defines overgrazing. Why did they not define it? Because it was a belief in society, a belief thousands of years back, that animal numbers equals overgrazing. Too many animals means land degradation. That's how I made that terrible mistake with the elephants. I proved, because we scientists prove what we believe. We don't do the other way around and believe what we see what we believe. So I worked with some of the top ecologists in the world, people like Sir Frank Fraser-Darling. I worked with American Fulbrighters and others. I did the data gathering. I proved that we had too many elephants. This is why our national parks areas were deteriorating. We published it. It was very unpopular. We had other scientists inspect my work. We all agreed. They agreed with me. Now, our government went ahead and we shot 40,000, and it got worse. We were wrong. And I said that in the TED Talk. And all the scientists are wrong, and they're still wrong on it. And when we went back and looked at the good research, which was not in the range field, but in pasture in France and worked there, we found that the Frenchmen had broken through with that and realized that animals overgrazing plants does not equal too many animals. It means too long a period of exposure of the plant or re-exposure. So all we're doing now is applying the science. And when you say there are lots of papers criticizing it, it is holistic management, not holistic science. It is a framework for managing social, environmental, economic complexity to develop policies, do all these things. All right. Now, when we do that, when we did that and developed it, 2,000 scientists worked with me as I was developing that, courtesy of the USDA, right between 1980 and 1984, in that period. Now, with that, we were desperate to find the flaws, and they helped me find flaws in our logic and in the science. By the end of that training, when we'd got the holistic framework working, all right, we could no longer find any flaws in the logic or the science. I was even offering $1,000 if anybody during the week of training could find a flaw in the logic or the science. Now, people who were not in that training, academics and so on, managed to get all that training banned. And they've continued to publish these papers that have got no bearing at all on what I do.
Well, the numbers don't compute, Alan. That's the problem I have with this, because right now our biomass is 2.5 times the biomass of all the wild animals that lived 10,000 years ago. And our animals that we raise for food are double our weight. And so, which means that you're looking at and they're eating 5 times as much food as we eat. So as far as the planet is concerned, they're 5 times our biomass. So which means, you have an equivalent biomass that's 12.5 times the biomass of all the wild animals that lived 10,000 years ago. And you're not suggesting that we need to double that, and that is, or triple that, and that's what's going to bring us out of climate change. And I just, as a scientist, as an engineer, I just don't see that happening. Anyway,
Yeah.
Jamin, I think I have to get going soon. Okay, it's 2 hours since we started.
Sure. Yeah. Well, perhaps we'll continue even today, even if you need to go, and then tomorrow we can continue the conversation as the three of us with other folks. One thing I wanted to point out, a couple things as I've been listening, and this is a fascinating conversation. I'd like to just kind of sum up a couple of points that I see. So Allan is talking pretty much exclusively about the grasslands, right?
No, I'm talking about all policies.
Okay, no, fair enough. Okay, so within the whole, if we were to focus on the grasslands that receive less than whatever the critical threshold is, 200 millimeters per year of rain, et cetera, what I'm hearing in those specific fragile ecosystems is that they need a certain amount and frequency of animal exposure to basically give the grasses a haircut. My hair is pretty long right now. Some people say it's too long and that I need a haircut. Let's use me as a model. So I, like the grasses, need a haircut. If the grasses don't get a haircut, they oxidize, they overgrow, they oxidize, they shade, and they kill ecosystems like you showed in your TED Talk, Allan. And so the gist of what I'm hearing there is that there is an optimal frequency of exposure, probably an optimal density of animals during their grazing. And then after they've grazed, then those lands need some time for the grasses to grow again, absent animals, right? So we can have too much animal exposure and we can have too little, and somewhere in the middle, there's a sweet spot. And my understanding is that much of your work, Allan, is precisely to find that sweet spot. Is that fair?
No.
Okay, go ahead. There.
Yeah, please try to understand, if you do all that you're saying, we're back focusing on the grasslands, then the Brazilian felling of forests and producing soybeans and cattle would continue. I'm talking about holistic management. How do you develop? Look, when America developed a drug policy, what happened? Drug use increased. We need holistic management to solve that. America's got a problem, a terrorist policy. They've reduced the whole complexity to the problem, and terrorism is increasing. America developed a soil conservation policy. What happened? Soil erosion increased. It doesn't matter what you look at. Every policy in the United States about managing natural resources is faulty. I'm talking about holistic management to address climate change and desertification and to produce this world with people. That's it.
Okay, so help me out here, Allan. Take a given grassland that has less than 200 millimeters rainfall per year, right? Am I correct in understanding you that there is an optimal set of policies or an optimal set of rules or an optimal algorithm for the frequency with which animals should go out and eat the grasses and then retreat from that area to give it a chance to bounce back? Is there an optimal cycle to that? No. Or is the optimal to just let the animals run free and do whatever they want?
No, if you let them run, what I'm pointing out is that you cannot solve the problems with technology and rest and fire. All right, so we need animals. We need them all over the world to restore agricultural soils and get rid of chemicals and fertilizers and so on. We need them everywhere. Now, where the desertification is at its worst in the areas you're talking about, okay, we need animals and we need lots more of them and increasing numbers to stop that desertification. Now, we do that through a planning process. There is no sweet spot or anything. Every situation is different. The different cultures, different people, different livestock, different seasons, all of these things are different. So we have a very simple process that literate people literally learn to do in a couple of days. And it's just a simple planning process that sorts out that complicated thing easily and gets the animals in the right place, right time, for the right reason. That's it.
Okay, so that planning process will result in certain patterns of animals grazing and then not grazing a particular hectare of land, correct?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's what I was trying to say.
Yeah.
So we're in agreement on that. Where I think the fundamental breakdown is occurring between that which you've just articulated and the vegan perspective is as follows. This is one of the breakdowns. I think there's multiple areas of breakdown, but one of the areas of breakdown is, okay, let's assume we have a group of vegans that goes through this training, understands it, gets it, and says, okay, I get it. There's going to be some, some optimal planning that's going to result for restoring this ecosystem with animals. I think where the vegans are saying, draw the line is, okay, fine, do all that, but please don't kill the animals to eat them, right? And then to which you would answer, well, goodness, if you're going to do all this ecosystem restoration where humans intervene on behalf of the ecosystems, including on behalf of the animals, to let them graze and do all this in an optimally planned manner, then what are those humans going to eat, right? And I would offer that there's a lot of ways that we could solve that problem, right? And so the fundamental, I really see huge room for massive agreement on bringing animals back to these desertifying lands so that they can perform their vital ecosystem services to reverse desertification and regenerate these ecosystems. One fundamental point of disagreement is, what do humans do to those animals in addition to letting them do all that? Do we
Yeah,
yeah, go ahead, Sailesh.
No, I was going to say that, there are a couple of issues there that I still have to wrap my head around, which is if humans eat the animals and they're taking the biomass away from that land and dumping it in a sewer somewhere, are we not taking nutrients away from that land continuously? And that is not a sustainable process, because you keep taking things away from the land, eventually it's going to deplete. Okay, so that's one condition. Second thing that I don't understand is with the current biomass already so skewed in favor of all these domesticated animals, I don't see how increasing that biomass is going to solve our problems, globally. I just don't see that. It just doesn't compute. And the scientific papers are all showing that it doesn't compute. And on that note, I do have something else to do. It's been 2 hours. And I think we need to wrap this up today so that we can continue this tomorrow. It's not a problem.
Very good, very good. Okay, well, I might continue on with Allan if you'd like, because I do want to help clarify some things. And then we can use that as a starting point for tomorrow. So tomorrow we're on for 11 a.m. Pacific time until 1 p.m. Pacific time. I've blocked off a full 2 hours, but then we'll have a lot more participants. So it'll get interesting, to say the least. But I do request of us and of everyone who participates, and I'll be facilitating. I'll probably have to play a much more active role facilitating tomorrow, that we maintain this openness and this listening. I think I really commend and thank both of you for that. And I think this is a longer process, because I think we need to pick out some of the complexity from this bigger picture. And so I'll attempt to work on that a bit with Allan if you have more time today, Allan. If not, we can continue tomorrow, no problem. But Sailesh, let us give you some last words before you head out.
Yeah, so it's been a great conversation, Allan. I completely agree with you on the context and the base that we are coming from. We all want to see a world in which people live in harmony with each other, and people live in harmony with nature. People live in harmony with the animals, and I see that as a system of normalized nonviolence that we need to get to, and that does not involve us having to go and shoot animals unnecessarily. That's my perspective on how we would implement a system of normalized nonviolence. And so thank you so much for the conversation. Thank you so much, Jamin, for facilitating the conversation. And I look forward to talking to you tomorrow.
Thank you, Sailesh.
Beautiful.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Sailesh.
See you tomorrow.
See you tomorrow. Bye-bye.
All right, we'll continue tomorrow. Meanwhile, Allan, if you want to continue, which I'd like to, because I think there's some things that we can clarify here. I don't know how you're doing energy-wise. Do you want to take a few minute break?
I'm fine. You would be a better judge of what you want to clear. Try and clear any misunderstandings. I don't want
Sure.
to come back to all Sailesh was saying because he needs to be there.
Sure.
But I think have you seen the 1-minute video we put out?
I can watch it now if you email it to me. What I'd like to propose, actually, I need to take a little bit of a bathroom break, and then I can watch it during that break.
Yeah, I'll send you a 1-minute video,
Mhm.
and it just answers all the stuff we were just talking about. It's 15 seconds of a drone flying over a national park, 15 seconds over another national park, 15 seconds over a community surrounding us, 15 seconds over land where the management has changed. And you've got 15 seconds looking at bare ground, bare ground, bare ground, desertification, climate change, and the last one, grassland and trees. Everything that Sailesh is wanting, but we did it by increasing the animals 400%.
And is there a way that we can, if you tell me how to find it on YouTube?
Yeah, I'll send you the link.
Okay, great. Okay, fair enough. But I'd also like for our viewers to be able to watch it. And I don't know, I'm ashamed to say I don't know how to post it right now.
I'm like you, I'm illiterate, computer illiterate. I will email it to you right away.
All right, and then in the meantime, shall we take maybe a 5-minute, 10-minute break? What would work well for you?
Yeah, 5-minute break's good. I'm needing to wee.
Okay, very good. So let's pause for 5 minutes, and everyone, we'll be back in 5 minutes. I'm just going to pause the recording, but we'll continue to live stream, and then I'll resume recording when we're back in 5 minutes. All right, Allan, I'll see you in 5. Thank you.
Can't hear you.
Okay, no, I was on mute for a little bit of break there. So, I think, see, what, if I may, unless you've got something on the tip of your tongue, go ahead. Otherwise, I've got some questions and comments.
Well, the only thing I might say is you see what's happening, and I don't know how to handle it because I'm not facilitating. You are, but I have the deeper knowledge of how the holistic process works. So, for example, what I'm saying is we were totally agreed, but it'd be much more valuable if we developed it together, that we want stable families living peaceful lives in prosperity and physical security while free to pursue their own spiritual or religious beliefs. See, that was our first sentence we agreed on. Now, the difficulty gets where you, on this one, it always breaks down on livestock because you cannot, you see, if you take the vast areas of the world across North Africa, 95% of that land can only feed people from animals. So if we agree to use animals as we got to that point, all right, so now we can use thousands of goats, camels, etc., whatever animals we've got, because the old animals have gone centuries ago. So we've got to use an animal to save humanity now. So we use these animals, and now you see, normally if we were sitting with people planning, and everybody's agreed at that point, pastoralists and vegans. Now at this point, you would get to where the vegans say, well, we don't want to kill. And you'd say, that's a good idea. You know, so that you don't start a conflict. That's a good idea. But now let's check that in this context. And now if you check not killing humanely, not allowing that, then how are you going to achieve stable families living peaceful lives in prosperity and physical security while pursuing their own beliefs? You see, now you've got one group that are violating the context that we've agreed is what should unite us. So that group now has to rethink, well, do we believe so deeply that we are going to stick to our grounds that we do not kill humanely, and it's going to lead to war, starvation, and violence, and continued climate change? No, maybe we need to change and accept the beliefs of other people too. You see, that's how it should work. It's very hard to do it. You're doing the best you can, and I'm struggling.
No. I think we're really getting to the crux of it, which is, let's assume for the moment, as I think we're very close to, I mean, just considering the two groups, vegans and I'm just going to say holistically grounded pastoralists on the other side, right? Who, well,
most of the population, most of the people of the world, they want peace and security. So the bulk of the people in cities and everything who are not pastoralists, they're going to suffer, because if you don't deal with this, and if you insist on not killing, you're just going to increase the emigration to Europe, and it's already changing the political face of Europe. So every city, every political party, and all these things in Europe are going to be aggravated by it. You see, it is holistic. You have to look at global policies.
Absolutely. And so what I'm trying to do is do some thought experiments, some what if scenarios, just that we can start to play with it. And so, but for the basis of these scenarios, I want to start with the very what for me is jumping out as a conclusion that I think everyone has the potential to agree to. Everyone has the potential to agree to this conclusion, that by reintroducing animals into these fragile, desertifying grassland areas with very low rainfall. By reintroducing animals in a holistically planned context, which you have mastered in your work, if we do that, we regenerate these ecosystems, sequester carbon, et cetera, even bring back rainfall, moisture, vegetation, et cetera, right? Mm-hmm. So that, for me, is a basis that I think we all have the potential to reach. Then the vegans, even those vegans that would agree with that, would then say, okay, let's say I agree with all that, that all sounds good, but what I disagree with is killing and eating the animals, right? Which makes me, two questions come to mind. Is there a way that holistically planned grazing and regeneration of ecosystems can happen where no humans kill any animals at all, let them die of predation or old age or disease or whatever? Number one, that's just doing a thought experiment here. And then number two, if that could be achieved without the killing of any animals by humans or the eating of any of their flesh by humans, then number two, what would those people eat if not animal products?
Yeah, and that's a good scenario. And let me deal with it as we would. Go back to this context we've got, all right? We've got a holistic context now. So you don't solve the problem by reducing it to the problem alone, all right? So we want to do that. And you've got the suggestion, use the animals and holistic plan grazing process to regenerate the land. We can do that anywhere, any environment, all right? But now in the environments where crops cannot be grown, all right, so we're doing that, and vegans say, and we don't want to kill the animals at all. All right, good idea. Now let's see how we might do that. You remember I started by saying economy, people, environment, they're indivisible. The economy is indivisible. That's what holistic management looks at. So now we would look at that and say, okay, Eamon and his friends there are going to raising these animals. We don't want them to kill. So how are they going to trade or do anything? They can't sell hides, they can't sell products from the animals, they can't kill the animals. So we've got to support them economically. How are we going to do that? Okay, so now we're going to have to produce money from somewhere. Cities where the population's gone are going to have to send masses of money out there to sustain these people so that they can buy food. You're really just hiring them now to run animals to save the cities. But somebody's got to feed them. Now you're going to feed them with a vegetation diet, a vegetation-based diet. Now this is defying 2 billion years of evolution. We're omnivorous. We don't have the teeth, the digestive system, the eyes, anything of a herbivore. We're not a herbivore. We're an omnivore. All right, so you're going to now have many more diseases and problems with humans because you're trying to make all humans now feed on a diet we didn't evolve to eat. So you're going to have enormous problems there. Now, you're also going to have enormous problems because the production of this plant mass, that is supporting the mainstream agriculture we have at the moment, all right? And that is the most destructive extractive industry ever in the history of mankind. To grow our crops, and I think the figures are very conservative because they're mostly just taken from the croplands. To grow our crops, we're producing 20 times as much dead, eroding soil as food we need for every human alive today. So you're going to greatly increase that simply to enable these people to buy that food. It doesn't equate. You'll end up with a terrible situation. You're dooming civilization. We're doomed. No, it's not going to work.
Interesting. Well, let's still, I think this this scenario that this hypothetical scenario that I'm discussing here could potentially be a sort of a transitional form scenario. Not that it would ever get implemented anywhere in the world, but as a scenario, as a hypothetical scenario, it might actually provide us with some common ground where we could meet with the vegans and basically come to some sort of agreement, even hypothetically, that says, okay, there's a starting point. The big win for these desertifying regions of the world is that we could reverse desertification, leveraging animals in a holistically planned context. Now, you then are left with the problem of what do these people do for their livelihood? How do they eat? How do they earn? How do they consume? If they're not able to sell these animal products and eat these, sell and eat some that they need to live, and then sell the surplus, or just simplistically selling it to people in cities. Okay. So if we start with this hypothetical scenario that we introduce and holistically plan the introduction and management of these animals to restore the ecosystems, that's already a huge win. Now, how do we enable these people to eat and live?
You've got a couple of problems with that, and we might have to patiently go through them. But you've got a group, vegans, who are trying to impose their beliefs. As I said, if people want to be vegan for spiritual reasons, good, do it. If they believe it's good for their health, do it. That is every person's right. Where they go wrong is they're trying to impose their beliefs on the world. You've got a small group now trying to impose their beliefs on the world, and they don't realize, they know nothing about complexity. As Sailesh said, he grew up in mechanical systems. That everything we make is not complex. It's everything we make is complicated. Space travel, I can't even make a pencil like this. I can't make it. I don't have the expertise. It needs technology. You can't make anything without technology. It needs expertise. Now, if you look at everything we manage, our lives, humans, human organizations, and nature, it's complex, self-organizing and complex. So they have no idea, for instance, that if you impose your view of no killing, it's just like Kenya. They banned hunting, and their wildlife decreased 60% in the next couple of years because they banned hunting. America's got millions of ducks and geese because of hunters, not because of conservationists. Hunting increases wildlife populations. Now, if you don't hunt, people poach. So if you stop killing on these vast areas of Africa and the world, or America, Texas, anywhere, if you stop killing, people will poach. You're not going to change human nature. They will poach. Now, poaching decreases animal populations. So vegans, by banning hunting, will bring about more destruction of wildlife. They just have no comprehension of how complexity operates. They don't realize that hunting increases animal populations. And it's thanks to the hunters that we've got these millions of geese and ducks in America.
What I'm hearing is that there is an optimal level of killing and extraction in order to achieve an optimal level of ecosystem prosperity.
I don't know that. I don't know about optimal level. I just know that if we are to address agriculture being the most destructive thing ever, we've got to regenerate the soils. If we're going to address and stop global finance driving environmental destruction, we've again got to manage holistically. And it's reductionist management that is causing every single problem humans are facing. And here we are being obstructed because the animal issue and vegans is a side thing. It's obstructing us from getting moving with what about the drugs your kids are using? What about all these things? What about terrorism? Every single policy is unsound.
Yeah, I'm right there with you, Allan, with the holistic and taking the whole of planet Earth as our holistic context. The whole of humanity, the whole of all species on Earth, the whole of all ecosystems. And as we discussed, I remember when I interviewed you back in I think it was early 2016, wow, that was like 4 years ago. We had a nice interview. We talked about how my organization, Radish, is developing a new standard for a compassionate economy whose aim is to holistically transform the very mode of production of the global economy. And I personally believe that what will be required for us to survive is a radical holistic transformation across all of the following dimensions and more: human culture, our entire set of living arrangements, be they urban or rural, the very mode of production of the global economy, our use of currency, our use of money, the very paradigm that humans can and should own property, right? And do whatever they want with their property, whether it's rural, agricultural, or urban. I'm just expressing my belief that our system is so broken that we need a deep, radical, holistic transformation across all of these dimensions, including human culture and including that which provides the foundation for modern human culture, which is our very story of humanity, who we are. Who are we? How did we get here? Why are we here? Where are we going? How are we going to get there? Right? So I'm coming at from a context that we need a radical and thorough, holistic transformation of our entire world, starting with humanity, since we're the big driver. We're the big driver of destruction. We can be the major driver of healing and regeneration. So I just wanted to make that clear. I'm coming from a place where everything needs to transform.
Yeah, I get it, and I'm in agreement with you there. And I'm a simple man, and I'm a very practical person. And you know, I was at one time president of a political party, and I've had to face a whole country at election times and things. And what are you going to do about defense? What are you going to do about education? What are you going to do about forestry? What are you going to do about agriculture? What are you going to do about fisheries? What are you going to do about this, that, and the other? I've had to be in that position as a president of a political party, all right? And you can try and tackle all of these issues and problems and philosophize about them. What's the role of man and when will we be? And we'd be arrogant if we thought we were the first people in the history of the world to see our connection to nature and think holistically. There's abundant evidence that past people did that. There's evidence that Native Americans tried to think 7 generations ahead. We know they had taboos about marrying in the family, taboos about hunting, taboos about all sorts of things. What are taboos? They're nothing but the experience of people of what went wrong. And they didn't have laws and regulations, they had taboos. So we got abundant evidence of all of this. And all I am saying is none of it helped us. We, all cultures, all ages, we've cumulatively led to the point we're at now. There is no noble savage. You can look at people who've damaged their environment least, some of the tribes in Brazilian wet tropical forests. Okay, but the decision-making is exactly the same as any animal, any human. And the moment you give them a chainsaw and a t-shirt, they wreck it. They were saved because their primitive technology couldn't damage the environment, and because resting the environment was by default the milieu practice. And those environments rested recoverfully. That's why you find the abandoned cities under fully recovered jungle. All right, so when you've got a situation like this and you've got all these things that you're trying to grapple with and others are, I loved an analogy that Sam Bingham used once. He was writing the first edition of our textbook with me. And Sam used this story of the puppets. And he said, you know, you look at a puppeteer And you think, how does this guy do it? He's moving all these strings, and this puppet's arms and legs move in rhythm, and it looks so human like its movements. I mean, he must be incredibly clever. No, he isn't. He's got one string to the center of gravity. If he pulls that string, the arms and legs move automatically. And then he's only got to lift an arm or lift a leg, etc. That stuck with me. Okay? When you look at all the plethora of problems and things to solve, you said, all right, keep digging, keep digging. They're all coming from management. They're all solvable at the same point. End of the day, everything that happens to humans is because of our management. End of the day, humans, like all tool-using animals, use the exact same genetically embedded decision-making. So if you look at a crow, an otter, an ape, or you look at the most sophisticated team of scientists at NASA engaged in space exploration, it'll shock you. They're using exactly the same decision-making. A baboon sitting in Africa and the most sophisticated team in the United States of integrated scientific team are using exactly the same genetically tool-using animal decision-making. That's where we've got to address it.
And in both cases, the context is decisive.
Correct. And in both cases, they have reduced the complexity to meeting a need, a desire, or addressing a problem. The baboon has a need or a desire to break into the termite mound. You see, it's got to use a tool. It picks up a stick or a stone and starts bashing at the termite mound. Or it uses a piece of grass as the tool and sticks it down the hole, and the termites grab it and it pulls them out and eats them. A scientific team engaged in space exploration, they've got a problem exploring space. How do we get out there, etc. Okay, they reduce this full web of complexity and everything to the problem. We're going to get into space, blah, blah, blah. They've got to use a tool. They use technology. How do they make the decision? They made it on expert opinion, past experience, research results, one or more of many factors. It's exactly the same. Every human's done that. And all we've realized now is, hang on, there's a problem with that. There are two glitches. First, you must not reduce it to a need, a desire, or a problem. You're going to have to deal with those, but you deal with them in this holistic context. You deal with them in this context that brings human needs, desires, everything connected to our life-supporting environment. Then we can solve them, right? And there's another flaw. When I was pushing Sailesh and saying, what are you going to do about desertification? It's got to be done with a tool. And, humans have had technology since the first stone stick tools. Then we got our second tool, fire. And today, train in any university in the world, in any profession, and you'll be trained to use technology and fire. If you're in a conservation field or something, you may be trained to use resting the land, resting the environment, conservation. So now you've got three tools. Now with those three tools, you cannot stop the climate changing. You have to add animals as a tool, and the vegans are blocking it.
Yeah, I get that. That's what drew me to you in the first place, and why I went out to see you in Colorado and really see firsthand. Remember, you took us on that field trip. I think it was somewhere south of Boulder, where there were the buffalo there, and you showed us the methods of clumping and whatnot. And so getting back to the reductionist problem that you were talking about. So reducing whatever is being managed to a need, a desire, a problem. Let's take the reductionist versus the holistic, right? And that's what really I think you and your organization have really mastered, is bringing this holistic to a particular region. And I think you've come up with something that really makes sense for that entire region, with exactly the context, a holistic context, rather than an individual need, desire, or problem. And so where I'm going with it is, can we take this holistic framing and expand it from that region to the entire planet?
Absolutely. You can expand it to anywhere, because think of it this way. The whole planet, every human being, every government agency, every environmental organization, everybody is using the same framework. Now, all you can do is just replace it with a holistic framework in every situation. It's universal.
Yeah.
And you do not develop a holistic context for a region. I sometimes like to use the very simple example to get it to people that you could be managing holistically. You should be in your own life, all right? Because you're managing your life. You're complex. Families are complex. People are complex. Now, I got a lovely example of utter simplicity when Jodie and I, that's my wife, had a single woman staying with us for 6 months. She came from Africa and she had a son she was raising, and she was learning to be a trainer, training people back in Africa how to manage holistically. And she said to me one day, couldn't I do this myself? And I said, of course you can. And she said, will you help me? And I said, yeah. So we sat by the dining room table and I said, okay, what are you managing? Well, she's managing a life. She's employed. She's not managing land. So who's making your decisions? Well, she is. What about your son? Yeah, he and I together at times. Okay, let's sit with you and your son. Now, nobody has veto power over your decisions. It's just you. Yes. And I said, all right, how do you want your life to be? Spell it out. And we wrote down how she would want her life to be, raising her son and bringing him up, etc., as a single mother. And I said, okay, if you're going to do that, how are you going to have to behave for people around you to support you? You're going to have people that are dependent on you. You're going to have people you influence. You're part of a whole community, and you can't change them. What about you? The only thing you can change is yourself. So how are you going to have to be? I don't want to hear slogans and jargon and advertising and branding, because you're judged by your behavior. So she described how she would have to behave. All right. And then I said, now you're not managing land or the environment, but everything you eat and breathe and drink is coming from the environment. Everything you defecate and pass out and sell or throw out is going back to the environment. How would the environment around you, wherever you are, have to be 200 years from now for your great-great-grandchildren to live a life like that? And we just described that. I said, now you've got a holistic context for your life. Just start making your decisions in that context as you meet your needs, your desires, or solve problems, but do them in this context. And about a couple of weeks later, she came to me terribly excited. I said, damn it, this works. And I said, what happened? She said, well, I took my son, we went shopping. I had a shopping list and we'd got a trolley. We went around the supermarket, putting things in the trolley. I got to the checkout counter. There were 6 people ahead of me. I had to wait. And while I was waiting, I looked at my checklist and I looked at my son and I looked at my trolley and I thought of the context for my life. And she said, when I looked at my list, I saw desire, 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 need, need. And she said, I sheepishly went back and put half of it back on the shelves. The education of my son, my life, was much more important than these things I was buying because I desired them. That is holistic management.
Beautiful, Allan. Now, just imagine for a moment, and this is a really big, expansive imagining, that process that woman went through with her son. Imagine that all of humanity were to somehow simultaneously engage in creating a context for all of us and for the whole world, and that out of that context we could begin, and I think it would probably be an evolutionary process. I don't think it'd be like flipping a light switch, but we could begin to manage all of our lives and all of the resources that we impact, that we utilize, that we regenerate, that we destroy, that we impact in whatever ways, and that we create this holistic planetary context. And then within that context, whether it's governments, corporations, communities, neighborhoods, families, all the way down to individuals of whatever age, we all gradually live into a new modality where we're making decisions, management decisions, managing whether it's a family budget or our own backyard garden or whatever, but we're making these management decisions from this holistic context and in conversation with the rest of the world, which is my bread and butter, radical collective intelligence, creating essentially an environment, a culture, and a platform within which all of humanity can come and engage in, I call it one giant conversation, but what it really is are millions of conversations in parallel, but which are interconnected with each other. If we could create a planetary context that the world could look at and say, well, that makes sense, right? Yeah, go ahead.
I think you could. It might be a big jump. You know, I used to use the analogy with floods with people, and I'd say, you know, I've never seen a flood start as a flood. Never seen it. I've watched floods, and I've seen them as little drops of rain hitting dry earth and spattering dust. And then more drops of rain hitting damp earth. And then more drops of rain hitting wet earth. And then more drops of rain with the water beginning to trickle and trickle and trickle. And I've seen the trickles joining until you have a flood. And you cannot begin a flood as a flood. All right, so you're talking about a flood is needed. And I believe it has to start with people, you know, just ordinary people and communities. It has to go beyond that quickly. And I think the way to do it, to achieve what you're wanting, team humanity, managing holistically, which is what we're going to have to do or we're going to become extinct. I think what we're going to have to do is to recognize that as individuals, we can choose to turn off the light bulbs, ride to work on a bicycle, etc. But when we operate at scale, we have to do it through organizations. It's the only way we can operate at scale. Now, the moment you do it in organizations, you have a difficulty because the problem we're facing is how do you manage complexity? Now, everything that is complex in the world is what we manage. That is humans, human families, human organizations, and nature. Everything outside those, if you think about it, the only one you can think of is economies. You could say, okay, what about economies? But as I told you earlier, no, economies are so tied to nature and humans, that they're indivisible. So that's what our Achilles heel is. Now, when you try to manage that through organizations, another problem arises that I spoke about in talks in London and England recently, and that is that organizations are complex. Now, that means that once you form an organization, it doesn't behave like a human. No organization behaves like a human. We don't treat them like a human, and when an organization kills 1 million people in India, nobody is hanged, nobody is held up for trial, nothing. If the most, a CEO might get a slap on the wrist and a fine. You'd never do that to a human being who killed 1 million people. So we have organizations that take on a life of their own. Now, when they do, there are 3 what they call wicked problems, just meaning they're very difficult to solve. Everything we make is not complex, and problems when they occur, we can solve them given money and time. And so they're called kind problems. Now, when we look at everything we manage, which is complex systems, hard and soft complex systems in nature, then we find they have wicked problems. Now, one of those is that they do take on a life of their own and they reflect the prevailing views of society. So when a woman in Kenya started planting trees to stop the desertification and the violence in Kenya, she got a Nobel Prize. 80% of Kenya, trees can't stop the violence. The rainfall's too low. But society believes in it, just like I was discussing with Sailesh. They believe in planting trees. So organizations do it. And right now, the world is contemplating planting 1 trillion trees. But as I said to Sailesh, what do you do with forests that are desertifying? Why plant another tree? It's done because of beliefs. And at the same time, then, that organizations will support anything that's technological, using technology to plant trees, etc. They lead the opposition and ridicule to anything that's counterintuitive new. That's why you have all these published papers ridiculing holistic management, etc., because it's clashing with everything that organizations believe. All right, so that's a wicked problem. But then there's another one we've got to deal with before we can get to that ideal world you and I would like to see, where everybody's managing holistically. And that is there are two more wicked problems with organizations. One is that when you put us together, the most perfect people in the world, you and me and everyone, our friends we choose, in an organization with a hierarchical structure, etc., the way people communicate with each other, fear offending somebody, not talking up when they feel something, etc., don't want to look a fool, what happens is what emerges lacks common sense and humanity. So an example of that, you could ask almost any normal person in America, does it make sense for American institutions to be producing oil, to grow corn, to produce fuel for vehicles? No, it's stupid. Thousands of highly intelligent scientists are doing it because they work for institutions. Now, there's another problem with institutions, apart from being incapable of common sense. They're not capable of common sense, ordinary people are. Now, the other final problem is if they feel criticized or are criticized, it is extremely rare for an institution to say, we screwed up, we made a mistake, we're wrong, sorry. Let's go back to square one, let's start again. It's extremely rare. You see how much I got criticized for even admitting a mistake with the elephants. The vegans are still hammering me since 2013. How can you believe this man who made that mistake and confessed to it in public? You see how I'm ridiculed by institutions, etc. So they don't do this. Institutions will go against their whole purpose to defend the organization. And the classic case of that is the Catholic Church. They've known for centuries about pedophile priests. The whole aim of the church is to protect the innocent, etc. No, they protected the church and the priests. And only now, when enough people in the public are getting to know about it, are they mildly reprimanding priests. So we've got these real problems. We're trying to address complexity, and we've got to get through our organizations at scale to the point where we are all managing complexity to manage this, these institutions and the environment. And I believe that we have no solution to the first wicked problem, except getting enough of the public to understand that management needs to be holistic. Then it'll happen. That is beginning to happen. The branches of some organizations are beginning to change. We're almost there, not quite. And then the other two wicked problems, that they cannot be capable of common sense and that they circle the wagons and go against their very mission. I think that when the organizations themselves are managed holistically, they will solve that. with the holistic framework. And we've got very good people working on that with us, trying to work out a new way of managing organizations holistically. But we're in our infancy on that one. But if we don't solve these wicked problems and begin managing holistically, I think you can predict with relative certainty the end of civilization as we know it. We will not adapt to climate change.
Yeah.
Like the frog boiling in the water slowly.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally.
So what I'm trying to do right now, David, is I'm trying to pick one instance, one issue, and I can send it to you. I don't know if we should use it yet. We'll have to use our discretion, but it's a document I'm producing really to send to Prince Charles as one of the world leaders, because I happen to know him, to see if he would initiate the change. But I'm saying, why don't we? We had over 11,000 scientists recently say we need to start talking about the climate emergency, not climate change. And so they're starting to use that term, and they're very critical of the global leaders for not doing something. So I know one of the authors of that report. So I contacted him and said, okay, I love it that you've got this big megaphone, that you've got the world attention, but you are critical of the world leaders for not listening to you as scientists. And I said, please tell me, as scientists, what are you going to tell the world leaders to do? And he said, oh, we're going to come up with strategies and things. I said, tell me what they are. Give me some idea. How are you going to stop the deterioration in national parks? I just picked one issue. I said, what are you going to say? They don't know what to say. And finally I said to him, don't even answer me, because I know no scientist in the world can answer that. Because the deterioration and the fact that national parks in America, United Arab Emirates, Australia, etc., South America, Africa, are contributing to climate change and desertification is because of reductionist management. It's the only reason. So what I'm doing is I've written something that I want to send to Prince Charles, and say to him, would you be prepared to convene a solutions retreat where we just get the top people in the world you can, and we have world leaders observe, and they just come together with me, and we just pick the issue of national parks, because everybody in the world can agree on that national parks are good, they're to restore biodiversity, show what nature can do, etc. They shouldn't be contributing to climate change. Everybody can agree on that. So I said, let's look at national parks and see if that's true. And I said, where should we look at national parks? What about the climate in London and Joburg? Same rainfall, different climates. I said, if we look at national parks in climates like London, they're wonderful. They're restoring biodiversity, they're everything we believe. No warnings, nothing wrong with management that scientists are advising world leaders. I said, now what if we look at national parks in Africa or New Mexico? What do we find here? And we find deep arroyos, bare ground, trees dying, animals dying. We find a terrible situation. And I said, now, what do we do about that? And at that point, you find that whatever is suggested leads to conflict. And it just keeps leading to conflict, no matter what anybody suggests. And the only way you stop it is when you say, time out, gentlemen. Let's stop the conflict. Let's agree on a holistic context. And you get everybody to actually develop a holistic context. Total agreement, no compromise. And you said, now we have agreement. We have not reduced this web of complexity. Now let's see what we can do. And we've done 2 workshops like that. And in literally the next hour, you've solved the problems. So I want to try and see if I can do that on a global scale, because if we can do that and get world leaders observing it, then hopefully it can lead to what you're wanting, a world where we start moving as team humanity. And yeah. I'm in the departure lounge now. I'm 84, I'll be 85 this year. So with the best will in the world, I've only got about, say, another 5 years. And while I'm alive with the experience I have, I want to see if I can get that done.
Beautiful, beautiful. Well, I would love to work with you, Allan.
I'm going to email you that, but don't use it without consulting me.
Agreed, agreed, okay. Agreed. I will definitely read that. What I'd like to share with you right now, and I appreciate very much your time. I don't want to abuse your time, so let me know when you need to break.
Yeah, I've got to have dinner with some friends in half an hour.
Okay, so so that gives us what, another 20 minutes, or how much
10
time?
minutes, 15 minutes. I need to relax.
Okay, very good, very good, fair enough. And of course, we'll continue tomorrow. So in 15 minutes or less, let me describe to you something that we're co-creating here. And that is what we call collective superintelligence. And the vision is, let's start from the big vision and then we can figure out how to get there. But the big vision is a significant portion of humanity, let's just use the number 1% for now, which would be close to 80 million people. Imagine you had 80 million people participating on a weekly basis in conversations like these, okay? Recorded broadcast video conferences, which are also transcribed, and that's a really key feature. Imagine everything that we're saying is transcribed, and we're actually very close to achieving that even in real time, but we're not quite there yet. Then these transcriptions can, of course, be automatically translated into myriad languages. Google Translate has mastered that using United Nations translation data, and it works phenomenally well. Then imagine that these transcriptions across all these different languages are then indexed. And of course, Google has mastered indexing. They do it for free. Publish anything on the web, they'll index it for you. And that makes it searchable. So imagine you've got 80 million people participating in these conversations, in millions of different conversations on a weekly basis. They're all transcribed, they're all indexed. What that creates the potential for is for any one of these 80 million people to search for any kind of conversation they're looking for. I have this idea. Are there any other like-minded people out there or groups who are talking about this same idea, so that I can connect with them and expand upon the idea? Or maybe I'm searching for someone who has the opposite idea, and I'd like to have a conversation with them to really find out, why are we disagreeing, and how might we reach some sort of synthesis, thesis, antithesis, synthesis, etc. And so imagine that this whole community engages in this network of conversations, and that people are therefore able to jump from conversation to conversation because they're able to very efficiently find those conversations where they can accomplish whatever they're trying to accomplish next, whether it's build a coalition, have a debate, see how they can create a synthesis with an opposite point of view, et cetera, et cetera. And I have faith that through this process, the best ideas will bubble up because they will find support. People who have really great ideas will be able to broadcast those and say, who would like to come and talk with me about this, right? So yes, I can search for other people having conversations, but I can also broadcast that I'm creating a new conversation. So we can have all of this dynamic configuration of people around a conversation. They can resolve whatever they're going to resolve, then disband and join other conversations, taking with them what they learned from all preceding conversations. If you now think of these 80 million people, dynamically going from conversation to conversation, and there's this beautiful record, transcript record of all these conversations, the whole of that, all the data that's generated and all the dynamic jumping around from conversation to conversation, think of all of that as one giant planetary brain. So instead of a neuron being a unit that's firing, it's an individual broadcasting intent, searching, jumping from conversation to conversation. And so these 80 million people are kind of like, analogous to 80 million giant neurons with tremendous capability, communicating and coordinating with each other, reaching agreement, forming synthesis, trying certain experiments, etc. You still may have massive disagreements, but I believe that over time, part of these conversations would be precisely about the holistic context itself. Other conversations would be about applying that holistic context in order to determine how to manage a company, a national park, a grassland, etc. But that the whole of this group of humanity, 1% of humanity, 80 million people participating in this way, this is where I have faith that this collective superintelligence can help the best ideas bubble to the top, because they will attract the people that they need in order to take that idea from a seed to a full-blown reality. So that's the big picture of collective superintelligence that we're working on at Radish, and that we're starting to implement through conversations just like these, right? With you and Sailesh and myself, other conversations tomorrow with many more people. And part of how we're implementing this is that every Friday, we are organizing a 24-hour, what we call a collective intelligence block party, where tomorrow will be the very first, tomorrow, Valentine's Day. It'll be a single Zoom video conference room where we'll probably have dozens of people. But over time, by the following Friday, a week from tomorrow, we'll have multiple video conference rooms on different topics with different areas of focus, et cetera, et cetera. So this is how we're starting to generate this collective superintelligence, and it'll be an organic process. But I just wanted to plant those seeds in your mind that this is a community and a culture and a platform all coming together, not as an institution or an organization in the traditional context that we're coming from, because there is no common corporation here or government or anything like that. This is humanity coming together from different countries and cultures and backgrounds, coming together to talk about all of this in an organized way, to talk about the context, to talk about specific solutions, to talk about problems, to talk about whatever they want to talk about. And my faith is that in this process, more and more people will learn about you and holism and holistic management and the holistic framework. And there will be myriad conversations about a holistic context, because I think it'll become more and more obvious to more and more people that we need a holistic context, that context is decisive. So how do we create that? And then once we create that, how do we use it?
Well, it's certainly fascinating. It's a big undertaking. I don't know what your age is, because you're going to need a few years on that one.
I'm 51, Allan, and
you're young still.
Yeah, and I've been at this for a few years. We first had the idea back in early 2014, and we've been at it ever since. No,
I see what you're doing, and it's good, because it's things like that are needed, where people can cross all the boundaries, political, economic, racial, whatever, and communicate. When I wrote the first edition of my book, in the final paragraph, I said that the big issues we were facing as a world, breaking apart as we are today with the Brexits and the Trumps and all these things that are going on, I said we never could have solved it at any time in the history of the world until the tail end of the last millennium. And I explained why. I said, if we'd known about holistic management and desertification and so on in the Roman Empire, and we'd been talking about it, what could we have done? And the answer is nothing, because we didn't know the Americas existed. I've got a phone call. Let me just answer it.
Yeah, take your time.
Hi, Brady.
I'm going to pause recording.
Yeah, I can hear you. Okay.
Wrap up here in a couple of minutes, and then I'll just.
We'll see you just now. Okay, good. Bye.
Sounds awesome. Thank you.
That was my guess. They're on their way. So I said, no, I'm just finishing this. So what was I saying?
That now we have the technology that we didn't have in
Oh,
Rome.
yeah, no.
Yeah.
I said, we didn't in those days, if we'd known about desertification, etc., we didn't know the Americas existed. We didn't know Australia existed. We didn't know humans had already arrived there and changed those whole continents, destroying the animals and replacing them with fire. So we couldn't have done anything about it. Now we do know about it. And I went through now, if we'd known about it then, what could we have done about it? Still nothing, because we didn't have the technology to know about ozone depletion. We didn't have the technology to know about carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. Now we've got it. And I went through each factor that we needed to solve this as team humanity, and everything we needed was only coming together at the tail end of the last millennium. And I said, one of the things I said was the ability to communicate as a village. You know, the whole world is a village, and we've just got that technology now, and that's what you're talking about. It's one of the bits of technology that we need as team humanity. And I said, there's one more lacking, and it was the last one. And I said, it's just emerging, and that is we've got to have something that unites us as team humanity. I said, if you study us throughout history, we've always only united against an enemy. So we will unite against another enemy, we'll form coalition governments, whatever, until we've won the war or beaten the other enemy, and then we fall back to feuding amongst ourselves again. And so we seem incapable of uniting unless we have something to unite us. And I said, the only thing I can see emerging is climate change. I said, when we get the realization that this is the most profoundly serious, dangerous situation ever for all higher life forms, not just humanity, this may unite us, where we're not uniting against a human enemy, but just against our own reductionist management. So you're part of that with your communications, etc. For me personally, I would find it terribly frustrating to be involved because I, for so many years during the formative stages, when I was working with British and American ecologists and scientists and trying to work this out, because we had no idea where we were going, etc. And I cannot tell you how many papers I read in all different disciplines, frantic for knowledge. I read more in different disciplines than people with PhDs there. Just desperate to trying to find solutions. I looked at every country. It didn't matter where the information came from. I went to conferences. I sat around countless campfire discussions with scientists in the field, read all the books I could. And, I would pick whole books where I read the book and I agree with every word in the book, written to say things about people like Paul Hawken and so on, or Slow Money, excellent books like this. I read the whole book, I love everything in it, and I put it down and I say, so what? What are you going to do? At the end of the day, we have to make decisions.
Yeah.
Nothing works at the end of the day where the rubber hits the road is a human, has an objective, has to use a tool, and makes the decision on one or more of many factors.
Yeah.
That's the key to it all.
Yeah.
So I would get very frustrated in listening, because when it's like democracy, when you get all views being expressed and everybody has a right to a view, and if you silence somebody or interrupt them, you're disrupting the whole damn thing. Damn, there's that nice again.
Sure.
Hello? Hello? Damn, junk mail, junk full.
Okay.
But anyway, the point I'm making is, the more views you get, the more confusing it gets, but you have to have those ideas.
Yeah.
And there's a stage when we're developing policy with holistic framework, there's a stage where you go through where you look at the problem, you recognize, get people to recognize it's a symptom of whatever. You develop a holistic context, and then you hear everybody's point of view, etc. And then I actually have found that if I leave people talking and discussing it, they never, ever come to a solution. It just gets more and more confused. And the dominant views get to prevail, and they're not right, and they get to prevail. So what I had to do in the training, and I planned it with Arne van der Berg, who used to work with us as our director of education, and I said, Arne, I've got to do something. Humans, very, very few humans, once they've got into detail, can pull back and see a big picture. We have to get the human mind sticking with the big picture and going to detail, but not the other way around. And so when we'd got a policy to develop, everybody got it clear, they'd got a context, etc. I found that if I had experts in that field there and allowed discussion, it was impossible to solve it. Couldn't be done. So what I had to do was say, all right, I don't want to lose momentum. I cannot take too long, so I can't take more than about a day. But I would, at that point, ban discussion. I'd say from now on, you are forbidden to talk. You all have to stop and think. You're not allowed to talk to another person about this. Here's the problem. Here's the holistic context. Here's the issue we're trying to solve, right? The buck stops with you. I want you to come up with a basic foundation structure of how you would solve that problem in this context. Now, you're forbidden to talk to anybody else. You have to think of it. The buck stops with you. And we'll come back tomorrow, and that's it. And when I did that and banned any discussion, the whole quality of the work leapt up.
Wow.
Yeah, because everybody was forced to think. And when you're listening to somebody talking, you can't think.
Right.
And you need profound thought. So it does give us a difficulty. When you do what you're doing, people will be talking, thinking, putting their point of view, and it hasn't got reflective time. So I just leave that thought with you. Somehow you need to build in reflective time, deep reflective time.
Yeah.
Because that way we now work with policy. We have a period where when everybody's got the issue clear, knows what the task is, it's, if you make the period too long, you lose the momentum. If you make it too short, nobody has the time for deep thought. But it has to be, discussion is forbidden. And that's contrary to everything we've ever done. People say, oh, that's dictatorial, that's anti. No. That's starting to take in the complexity of the human mind and how we are. The moment we get into detail, I have yet to meet the humans who can forget the detail and come back to big picture.
Wow.
And policy has to be sorted out at the big picture level, working down.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, what you just mentioned is something that we can put into practice and experiment with within collective superintelligence, because each and every conversation, each and every group that gathers around a specific topic can agree upon its cadence, its frequency, its rhythm. We're going to talk for this period of time, and then we're going to let it rest for this period of time. And then we'll convene again, whether it's the next day or a few hours later, whatever. We'll experiment with different patterns in that regard.
Yeah, I see it even in myself. When I'm trying to amuse myself in an airport, waiting for a plane or something, on my phone, I'll play a game. It's a word game, and you have not a crossword, but you have a whole lot of squares, and you've got 7 letters, and you've got to fill in the right words with this thing. And I will get totally stumped. I've got 7 letters. I've got to find a 5-letter word that fits in a certain place. And man, it drives me nuts. I try every combination. I'm totally frustrated. And I will just close the damn phone, open it an hour later, and just, there it is.
Yeah, beautiful.
Yeah. I've got too caught up in the detail. I can't see the woods for the trees. I just shut the damn phone down. An hour later, I solve it.
Wow.
And it happens time and again. I've got it right now. I've got this big problem how to treat the thing. I've already sent it to you. It's on your email.
Okay.
Document for Prince Charles. And the other night I woke up, got it. How I'm going to handle that. I'm going to have to give keynote talks in Australia and New Zealand. I'm going to use that as the basis of those keynote talks, use the Australian mega fires that are out of control. The whole Australian attention is on that. Wow, wonderful opportunity.
Wow.
But I could not see my way through that. I've spent 3 weeks, I think, just an hour now and then, another hour now and then, trying to pencil out how I could handle this. And then I woke up in my sleep and there it is.
Wow.
Yeah.
Beautiful. All righty. Well, I know you got guests coming, so I'm going to let you go. I'm going to leave you with one final thought, Allan, which is that tomorrow from 7 a.m., you're in Mountain Time, right?
We're in Eastern Time.
Oh, you're in Eastern Time. Oh, okay. So tomorrow, Eastern Time, from 10 a.m. to 12 noon Eastern Time on the Block Party, we're going to have a 2-hour conversation led by me, Professor Guy McPherson, and Dr. Ye Tao of Harvard about solar radiation management, cooling the planet by reflecting a significant portion of the sunlight back into space. And I'd love it if you could attend. Because it's Block Party, anyone and everyone is welcome to join.
Will you send me a link to that in the time?
I will. I will.
Okay.
I'll send you the whole schedule.
And then I'll try to come into it.
Okay, great. And then you and I and Dr. Rao, Sailesh Rao, are again on tomorrow from 11 a.m. Pacific time to 1 a.m. Pacific time, which is 2 p.m. to 4 p.m. Eastern time. Tomorrow. So I look forward to that as well.
Okay.
And what a wonderful conversation, Allan. Thank you so much. Thank you. Look forward to seeing you tomorrow. Have a great evening. Thanks, Allan. See you soon. And I will monologue here for just a few more minutes, just to kind of wrap up. The first thing I want to say is, what a great conversation. Thank you again, Allan Savory. Thank you again, Dr. Sailesh Rao. And thank you all for watching and for submitting comments. I know a lot of comments have come in. I've really had to stay focused on this conversation. But if you guys want, I've got a couple of helpers here. We could go through some of those comments and at least address them. But before that, what I want to do is request that everyone take a look at, go to radish.org and take a look at the Collective Intelligence Block Party that we have planned for tomorrow, which starts at 6 a.m. Friday morning Pacific time, which is 9 a.m. Eastern time. And it'll go for a full 24 hours continuously. And you can check out the schedule there of the topics we're going to be discussing. And all the links will be there as well. So you can literally click on a link to enter this Zoom video conference space and participate with me and whatever guests are there in these conversations. This is us launching collective superintelligence at a very small scale, but with the intention of growing this exponentially over time. And so the first block party is tomorrow. We will have similar block parties every single Friday, starting at 6 a.m. Pacific time Friday, going for a full 24 hours. Now, tomorrow we're probably just going to have one single video conference room so that we're all together. We can get connected and have the conversations we're going to have. And then probably by the next Friday, the 21st of February, we will then have multiple video conference rooms on different topics. And the scenario that I was just describing a few minutes ago to Allan about these different video conference rooms transcribing, connecting, people searching, jumping from room to room, et cetera, and invoking this collective superintelligence that we now have the potential to invoke. And as per our previous discussion, the urgency to invoke. And there's so much to be figured out, but I want to invite everyone to join us. Gentlemen, feel free to even join me here on the couch. Get in front of the screen if you'd like, and we can work on we can take a look at some of these questions that people have been submitting. Okay, all right. I want to introduce everyone to Nolan Straight. Nolan, welcome. Welcome to the conversation. You've been listening in for most of it and following along on people's comments. So let's address their comments and let's make it a conversation. So if you've submitted comments and we're addressing them, please feel free to submit clarifying questions as well.
Well, I will say that recently there hasn't been a bunch of questions. We had some people asking you to bring up the aerosol masking effect.
Mm-hmm.
And I can remember. The short of it is there's not a lot to report on question-wise, but there was some good discussion going on in the comment section. So thank you guys for being there doing that. And please come by tomorrow so you can actually jump in the Zoom meeting.
Yeah, tomorrow it's going to get really dynamic, really interesting as you and many others jump in, and I'll be moderating and facilitating, and that'll be an interesting challenge. But the good news is we have more than 2.5 years under our belt of doing this on a weekly basis, with a smaller group, up to a couple dozen people at a time. So I feel ready for it. I mean, I'm sure I will learn and evolve, as we all will, as we jump into this new, it's not a medium, it's a mega medium of collective superintelligence. It's a mashup of different media. And we write about this on radish.org, accessible from the homepage. Our perspective on all this, which is unique, and you have a perspective too. Please bring your perspective. That's the big idea of collective superintelligence, is that we all bring our diverse perspectives, life experiences, areas of expertise, education, work experience, et cetera, and we mash it up together in conversation, and we see what comes out of it, and then we jump to different conversations. See, if all of participating humanity, again, let's just say we get to 1% participating, 80 million people, those won't just be 80 million random people, there will be 80 million of the people who are most awake, most, dare I say, creative, courageous, willing to experiment, willing to jump in there with us and co-create a holistic context for our planet, for Mother Earth, for all of life on Earth, not just for humans. And then over time, co-create all of the tools and all of the solutions. So global holistic modeling is one giant tool that we're going to be developing so that we can model these different solutions. But the end product, if you will be the solutions themselves. Whether it's holistic land management, whether it's veganism, whether it's transforming the mode of production of our economy from an economy of hoarding to a compassionate economy, all of these myriad solutions are sort of the end product. And so I kind of, in my mind, I kind of divide it into solutions. I'm going to use Nolan to represent solutions and me to represent what I'll call meta solutions. So collective superintelligence is a meta solution in that it generates solutions Global holistic modeling will be a meta solution in that it facilitates the modeling, analysis, perfection, optimization of solutions. And then we can take these perfected, optimized solutions and implement them. So think meta solution versus actual solutions. And I don't know that I have much more to add at this point, other than please join us tomorrow. Check it out. And there's two ways to join. You can watch the live stream of the video conferences tomorrow at the Collective Intelligence Block Party. You can just watch and submit your comments, like many folks have done today. Or, and what's unique about tomorrow is you can click on the link to join the Zoom video conference and be actually in the same Zoom video conference room with us and be talking with us. How cool is that?
Super cool.
Super cool. All right. All righty. Well, anything else to say? Anyone? Before we adjourn today's meeting?
Just thank you for watching. If you made it this far, really appreciate you being here.
Thank you.
Awesome meeting today. Just ridiculously awesome.
All right. And we're going to have a lot more ridiculously awesomeness as we get into Block Party territory, starting in about 14 and a half hours. It's coming. Oh my goodness, it is coming. Better get some rest and some food.
Yeah, no kidding.
All right. Well, thank you all for watching. Thanks again to Allan Savory and Dr. Sailesh Rao for participating. Thank you. Nolan, for your awesome support. Thank you all. And we'll see you tomorrow at the Block Party. We start at 6 a.m. Pacific time, Friday morning, February 14th. Go to radish.org for all the links and all the details. See you tomorrow. Thanks, everybody. See ya. Stop recording. Let's end the meeting.